Right. And what I'm showing you, the names are consistent, right? Meaning it's not this arbitrary name. They're not it's they are actually handling them. They're taking the meaning of them, putting it into Egyptian, and oftentimes picking an Egyptian form that also has other meanings that actually match the individual too, like Nephi, for example. So we know it means the first Nephi that is beautiful. We can see that. We can see the glyph form that matches that, but it also is the same glyph form as protector, which is talked about in the Book of Mormon. So that glyph has two meanings.
Mormonism with the Murph, where Larry Singh explores church history and the church's truth claims. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel, Mormonism with the Murph, where Larry Singh explores the church's history and the church's truth claims. This is part 2 of my series and episodes I'm doing with geologist and Book of Mormon researcher Jerry Grover on the characters document. And Jerry has a book here. It's called The Translation of the Characters Document. And we're doing some episodes, and he's going through on slides his process for attempting a translation of the characters document, and that they're a mixture of Mayan glyphs and Egyptian hieratic and Demotic, and he's sort of going through how he went about translating. The last episode, I think, got a lot of good engagement. There was a lot of comments and people from different sides, but I think part 1 was a good episode and people really enjoyed it. Have you had any response to part 1?
Yeah, I've had a few contacts, and most of them were, not too like out in the stratosphere, but some good questions. I think it's obviously an area that nobody really has heard much about. So I think a
Yeah.
lot of the questions were like, wow, how is this? Why wasn't translated before? Or why is there no publications? That kind of thing. They were kind of like looking for more information. I was, well, it is what it is. So.
Yeah, I think there's a few like maybe quite informed, like nuanced members who would follow scholarship, who were aware of your work, but probably for the most part, a lot of it was quite new, which is good to sort of bring this to light and your work and to spark a conversation. And it's certainly controversial. You have different opinions and different sides, but I think it's quite unique, the work that you've done. So maybe we could summarize for any people who haven't watched part 1 what we talked about in part 1, and maybe briefly just explain again what the characters document is for those people who haven't watched part 1.
Okay. Do you want me to start my program, the
Yeah,
slideshare,
yeah,
and then I can just discuss it there so that you can
sure.
actually see the characters document on there. So,
Good stuff. I think I've enabled sharing.
okay.
And I'll also put a link in the description where people can get your book as well. You can get it online for free as well. Also, some of Jerry's other books he's done on geology. You've done one on jaredite names. I think you've done one on the gold plates as well, haven't you?
Yeah. The next slide, I have all my books. I'll
Oh,
just mention them. So
no problem.
that was one of the questions I got from the first presentation. So I thought, let's put this on there so they can see what they all are. So,
Awesome.
okay. So yeah, we're doing here is going through the translation that I've rendered on the characters document. We talked a little bit about where it came from. Basically, it came through the David Whitmer family. Handwriting analysis says John Whitmer, who was a scribe. So it does look to be the characters off the plates, right?
Right.
And the what I decided to do is, instead of just like trying to take you through each character and translate it, because some of them are duplicate, that kind of thing. And there is some unique structures and things that so last time we talked about there are a lot of dates and numbers in it, because it is as I mentioned, it's kind of a chronological summary. Probably the first part is the preface to the Book of Mosiah, I think. So we went through all the numbers in the first presentation, and then also, because a lot of the numbers are dates, we talked about the kind of the calendar structure, which matches, and some of the glyphs, these it came to pass glyphs, match the Maya it came to pass glyphs as infix. They're infixes in the Maya glyphs. They're not Mayan. In fact, I think the Mayan is borrowing from the Nephites. So that was kind of what we talked about for the most part.
And I don't know if I asked you this question last time. So you're saying that you think this might have been come from the beginning of Mosiah. Do you believe this was copied down during like the 116 pages part of the translation? Uh,
Yes. Well, we know it had to be in the sense that if it was, I mean, the Anthon transcript was clearly during that stage.
yes,
And Joseph Smith talked about at the beginning, he copied off a certain number of characters
right.
uh, before he started and translated a few of them. So what we
Before
have,
Harris went and took them to scholars.
yeah. So what we have, this doesn't mean that this document, it may have been a copy of those that he copied, right? So we don't really know that, but it does look to be, or probably, and I mean, and the translation is actually that, meaning we don't, the translation isn't in the Book of Mormon that we have. So it is from that, it's either 116 pages. I do say there's a possibility that at least the last part, maybe it could have been on the small plates, the continuing writing that, because they only translated up to Benjamin. And so we don't know what more was, and it talked about Mormon making a record on them or something like that. And so that's a possibility, but I do think it's probably the preface to the Book of Mormon that was contained there. The Book of Mormon probably had a preface, just like all the books have prefaces, you know. And the title page was by Moroni after the compilation. So this would have been the preface to actually Mormon's abridgment.
Oh,
Um,
okay. I see. And it likely would have been, if it was done during the 116 pages, a copy of a copy, because I believe they didn't do the translation at the Whitmer's home in Fayette until around June of
yeah,
1829. So you're
yeah,
thinking,
well, yeah, it's at least that, you know, since it's in his handwriting. And so it could, maybe it's a copy of a copy of a copy. And there is another example we talked about, like a newspaper broadside that has the first four lines on it. There are some differences, minor. So somebody else has copied it. There must have been we know there's another copy because somebody's copying off a base copy. Because this was not in the church when that happened, because it was taken by when Whitmer probably left and got into the David Whitmer. So again, we don't really have 100% provenance on the document, if you will, but it's narrowed down pretty good to say, yeah, came off the plates is is at least a copy of a copy. Maybe there were some other you know, another copy. We don't know.
okay.
So these are other books on my website here that I've written. Geology of the Book of Mormon um, just talks about Third Nephi event, and there's a couple other geological events in the Book of Mormon. Evidence of Nehor religion in Mesoamerica. This is actually doing a comparative Benedite sacrifice and the Nehor religion itself, comparing it to the Maya belief system, showing the correlations and the prophecies that match.
Hmm.
Swords of Shul, it's basically looking at the land northward chronology and geography in Mesoamerica. Um, so basically talking about mostly Olmec, Jaredite archaeological correlations and cultural correlations and that kind of thing.
That would be interesting doing like an episode on the Jaredites and
Yeah.
cultural correlations, because I know my interview with Brant, it was mostly focused on correlations and convergences between the Maya in Mesoamerica and the Nephite Lamanites in the Book of Mormon. So that would be quite fascinating to talk more about the Jaredites.
Yeah. And we'll get into a little bit from that book on one of the names. Today we're going to talk about the names in the characters document as well as the tribal names.
Right.
So, and so as we get into that, and like I said, the reason we're taking these in chunks is instead of just translating, trying to go through each one, it is important because the names, you need to discuss what the Book of Mormon is doing with names before, and then you kind of can go through each of the names and translate them. So that's kind of the approach, and that's the approach, you know, that I wrote the book takes that same approach. So, and then my most recent is Calendars and Chronology of the Book of Mormon. There's actually some insight there, the Lamanite glyph, which we'll talk about today, but that I didn't have in the translation because there was some. Actually, I've discovered a few new things on the a few of the glyph forms, and that goes through basically explains the night of brightness, the signs and wonders that came when Christ was born, and has a very I've got the chronology pretty well worked out. that's always been kind of a confusing thing as what years are they using and how does it
So
tie
there's
into
three different calendar systems, I believe, were used in the Book of Mormon. Is that right?
um yeah, they run their calendars um at the same time concurrently. There is a Jaredite calendar, right? We don't have year counts for Jaredites, but they look to be using the 270-day festival type calendar that's in the known in Mesoamerica. That's why you have people that look to be way too old, but if you use that year count, then it brings their ages within known science. You know what I'm saying? Instead of being 140 something years old,
I
they
think I
go
remember when talking with
orient.
Brandt or reading in his book, he talked about that it's most likely the Nephites would have adopted the Mayan calendar and dating for years in the Book of
Yeah, and
Mormon.
I actually did not find that actually, and the reason and
Oh no.
no, a lot of people think that, but if you think about it, at least initially, they started counting the years in the old world. So they weren't all of a sudden shifting to a Maya count system when they got here. Meaning because their prophecies were made under that calendar, the 600-year prophecy. And so they were counting. They probably were, knew about those other Mesoamerican
Mm.
systems, but
I think
they were not Maya. I mean, that's part of it. Some people just think, oh, the Nephites are Maya. It's like, no, the Lamanites, in most of like the Sorensen model, the Lamanites are the Maya culture. The Nephites are not. And so you wouldn't necessarily expect them to follow the Maya calendar system, right? So,
because I think if I remember, I think Brandt would have made the argument that Nephi didn't start writing his record until they got in Mesoamerica. And I think the 600 years he said would work out correctly under the sort of Mayan years
yeah,
because it would have been what around 587 BC roughly when they left.
I go,
This is just going off
yeah,
memory.
I go into that. It doesn't really work because they have a 360-day year. So it still doesn't work.
Okay, well, all right.
Yeah. No, and actually John Sorensen said that initially, and then he backed off. He says because there was another article came out by Spackman, Randall Spackman, years ago. He's like 80 years old, and it kind of explained does look to be a lunar because the Bible is a lunar is in the lunar years. Um, Meaning most people don't realize that it's a lunar. They did have a solar correction later, but so they were. It does actually match what you would have expected them to carry on through. The other thing I looked for all the Maya correlations, all the cycles, everything. I didn't really find anything much. And yes, some of the years, like the 400-year prophecy and the 5 years, but those are mostly derivative of the numbers system that the Mesoamerica used, not necessarily, that they had to be following their calendar. But I actually found I think they almost tried to avoid those calendars because those calendars are based on their gods and their festivals for their gods, all these kinds of
Right,
things.
right.
So I don't think, why would they use that calendar? They had their own. And I think they wanted to keep it separate. It was their religious calendar, not the Maya religious calendar. It was their religious calendar. You
Right. So you
know,
think the Nephites probably wouldn't have adopted the surrounding Mayan culture as much as, the Lamanites who would have been very much immersed with the Mayan
well,
sort of
yeah,
culture.
well, I think that was the challenge. I think they did. The wicked Nephites did. That's why the Order of Nehor, all this stuff is Maya stuff. But
Mm.
the pure Christian religion wasn't, and I think they tried to, from what I can tell, they tried to keep it separate. They did not want to be, Mormon doesn't even mention their gods, the other gods and all that. He's pretty careful not to, just as their idolatry and all this stuff. So I guess what I'm saying is, as I thought about it, I was like, why am I not finding really these correlations to the Maya cycles? I mean, I do see a few they're favoring the base 20 number system. Their number system is not base 20. It's been modified a little bit. So it's kind of like I'm seeing that they are not at all following the Maya. And I was curious, but I thought, yeah, it would make sense if they don't. Why would they be using the Maya calendar that is really just constructed and tied to all their pagan gods and pagan festivals and all these things?
Yeah,
It
that would
makes
make too
sense.
much sense.
Yeah, so because they have and I kind of show there's a Jubilee calendar sitting in the Book of Mormon. They're preserving some of the Old Testament stuff, which is on a lunar calendar, which they used early on. So because they had the brass plates, that was their guiding, calendrical stuff. That was their sacred
Right.
records, right? So they're just continuing the best they could. So Anyway, that's a little off topic, but and then the magic goggle, Zipf magic goggles and golden plates, found the meaning of Zipf anciently, what it would have meant. That's one of those words that's not translated in the Book of Mormon. And then I went into a metallurgy of the how the plates themselves were probably made and describe all the techniques and the descriptions and show that they were anciently known. Um, Sumerian roots, this is where nobody had made any progress on any Jaredite names, really, and all the people that had worked on names. So this is I said, I think I figured it out. It looks like they're using Sumerian roots to construct these names, and they're using a Mesoamerican fashion and the way they do compounds. And we'll actually mention on one of the names I'll talk about lib. It's not in the characters document, but it's related to Mulek. So, and then this other book, I did not write this, but I did publish it. This is Brian Stubbs. Um,
He's a
he's a
linguistic scholar.
Yeah, and he kind of shows about 1700 or so Semitic and Egyptian terms in the Uto-Aztecan language family, and shows the sound shift that they went through. And so he's written his own book that's more for the lay people, a little short book that you can buy on Amazon. This is the big, one for linguists. If you want to look at it, just make sure you got a bottle of asprin by you when you do. So,
So he's saying that there is this Udo Aztecan language with sort of influence of both Hebrew and Egyptian.
yeah, it's not the source of the language. It's an infusion, is what he calls it. Kind of, it's not really kind of like people think of Creole, like where another language combines. It's not really Creole, but it's like an infusion. There was some sort of infusion of these terms into the language family way back. And this is the language of the Aztecs and Nahuatl. Aztecan goes all the way up to the southwest United States, but it's all the way down into Mesoamerica, and there's still lots of people speaking Nahuatl. And it's the language
So that
in
language still
Mexico City.
exists today.
Yeah, I mean, because that was what they spoke when the Spanish came, when the Aztecs were conquered. So yes, they learned Spanish, but smaller towns, that kind of thing. Probably like Ireland, they have their own little dialects, maybe, and have kept those. And
Yeah,
so,
that's true.
yeah.
That's interesting because I don't think until starting the channel I hadn't heard of the Udo Aztecan language in Brian Stubbs' work. Maybe I can try doing an episode with him. That would be fascinating. I don't think he really goes on podcasts very much.
No, he's done some. He's had some health issues here last year or so. So I think he actually, this is the second edition. So he gave me we put up the second edition. It's not final, but he wanted it out. So he's still working on stuff. But I think, and he probably would. He's given a few presentations at some conferences, not really recently, but part of the problem is if you think the characters document is in the weeds, the U.S. they get in, all these terms and adverb structures and all this grammar stuff that meaning to really understand it, you have to understand historical linguistics, right? How language changes over time. So it's not this simple thing saying, oh, here's the word for this, and you find it exactly that way in Uto-Aztecan. There are a few like that, but a lot of them are like, okay, here's the sound shift that occurred 1,000 years ago in the entire language family or something like that. And so if you take that sound shift backward, then you find the Hebrew does that make sense?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And they use all their different symbols and codes, almost like math when you're looking at what they're doing is how it works. So
Good stuff.
I'd say have him on, but maybe one of those.
I'll maybe say just keep it like surface level.
And he could probably do that if he sticks to his little book, because he's simplified it for the
lay person. All right.
Yeah, and actually his book, if you go on my website, I have a page that's dedicated to him, has all his publications, not just Book of Mormon, anything. And there is his little book that you can click through and go to Amazon and buy it if you want. So
all right.
So those are my books. I've had a few other articles that are on my academia that some of it got incorporated into books, some not, but so I have some other research. Okay, this is a characters document. One thing we talked about last time is there have been numbers assigned to each of these glyphs. And so if you see it's basically starting, it runs right to left. So there would be a C dash the number. So when we're going through the translation, it'll say, okay, these are the glyphs, and it gives them a number to it. So you could actually find it if you wanted accounting. And in my book, it actually has a maps the character numbers out. So um, just so you know, that's and then basically what I mentioned is these first four lines are different than the last three in terms of um, it's not a continuous translation. So um, th- it is obviously copied from different parts, I think.
Right. Okay.
Okay, this is the translation. Not necessarily going to go through it. It's just up here of the first four lines. It does seem long, but that's because you had words like it came to pass. I didn't always translate it that way. Sometimes I put since, but sometimes some of the glyphs actually did have, you know, um, like there be a glyph for west in the land of desolation. That's actually one glyph, really. And so,
And you
um,
said last one said logographic script.
yeah, so it's more logographic. Logographic means that you have like, um, that there's not really, if it's purely logographic, there's not really phonetics in it. I mean, you can't like sound it out. You just have to know what that glyph means.
Hmm.
I'm not saying there isn't some phonetics. There is, and and you're representing like a complete word sometimes with just one glyph instead of multiple letters. So it's a more compact script. So and
Gotcha.
and English, and I didn't like see ands and these kind of things. It seems like those are not there. You have to read it in context. So
So it
we're
seems
in
like
the
quite efficient line,
yeah.
efficient writing.
But I think maybe that's what he complained about. He said, I can't really express myself as good because maybe you couldn't put in like flowery chiasmus, in terms of you maybe had a word that a glyph that meant a phrase, but maybe you couldn't manipulate the phrase or something, in turn. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
I'm not saying for sure, but it's consistent. Then the second, which is a summary, basically a summary. It's not the full summary. It's basically starting Samuel the Lamanite prophecy, but it contains all of the major prophetic events um, past that point in the Book of Mormon, and also some other, a little bit of other events that aren't necessarily prophetic but are significant. So, um,
Okay. So this is the last three lines, and there was some of like the prophetic events that you translate.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So, and you actually, if you look at the characters document, you can see these little dashes. This is an interesting side note. These little dashes, you actually can see down here. You see these little here. There's none of those up in here, right? So you see these periodic.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I actually point
I
that
had
out in
not
the book.
noticed that before.
Yeah, so the structure's different. I mean, you could say, well, maybe that's a word, but when I looked at it, it says, well, there's kind of too many of them, and that's actually in Egyptian. That is, it has the same function. It's like a break, and the only punctuation that we have in the entire Book of Mormon in the original text is everyone says there was no punctuation. There is actually a dash in one of the prefaces that was in the original text. So it is the only punctuation mark I think that was in the character, in the Reformed Egyptian.
Is it sort of like equivalent to like a full stop, almost like the end of a sentence or expression?
Yeah, not really yeah, kind of expression, but actually in Egyptian, it was like in tabulations, they would be a stop. So you do it, stop, do it, stop. So it actually is consistent with if you're doing like a calendrical summary or something like that. Meaning they didn't necessarily use it like totally like we use a dash. We use it for all kind of things, hyphens and that kind of stuff, and end of sentences to connect. They were just using it really only if they were like listing something. Does that if that makes
Yeah,
in
no,
in
got
in,
it.
in Egyptian? So
Okay.
okay, all right. This is the part two. We're going to talk about a few more calendar glyphs that we didn't get to: personal names, place names, and tribal names. We'll see what we can get through today.
Because
You
last
know,
time we were very much looking at sort of cracking the numbers and you comparing them to a lot of Mayan glyphs for the most part, is from my memory.
Yeah. If we don't get to all of them, so you don't get your, you know, Reformed Egyptian translation certification completed, we'll address them in another episode.
we all my listeners who are watching this, we want to get a certificate at the end of this.
Exactly.
We are trained and certified in translating Reformed Egyptian.
Exactly. You can put it on your resume and
Yeah.
people are like, what the heck? So, okay, so let's kind of and one thing we'd explained previously is the way Egyptian, you have monumental Egyptian, which is the full what's on the tombs and on the temples, and those are like where they depict a bird or a building or some part of a building or a staff or a person. So it's actually a full picture, right? It's a full logograph.
Mhm.
Hieratic is a shorthand of that. So it's the same glyphs, but it's just a shorthand of each glyph.
Right.
And there's the monumental has what's called Gardner numbers they've assigned to each of the glyphs. So when you see that, when I have like a V dash something, or B, it's just because like they grouped all the insects together, all the birds together, all the parts of the body together and assigned a letter, right? And so that's not me. That's Egyptian people that translate Egyptian or just Egyptian language.
All
Then
right.
in the hieratic, I have there's a guy named Mueller who created he was kind of the first one to create basically a list of all the hieratic glyphs, if you will. And so those have their own number. So you have Gardner number, then you have that. And demotic is is another, it's found, we have some glyphs that are demotic in the characters document. Demotic is a shorthand, a further shorthand going starting in 650 BC. Um, that it has some of the glyphs are the same as hieratic, but others are not. So it's another shorthand. Those I don't really assign numbers to. I just give you the source of where I got it. And all the things I use, these are all sources you can look up online, honestly. I mean, and so I don't, and the dictionaries I use are all the standard dictionaries. So this translation is not, yes, of course, there are some like the number structure is different. There were some calendrical, they were Egyptian glyphs, but they were being used maybe in a Maya, in the way that the Maya used their chronological structure. So there are some different applications, which we would expect, right? It's a little different. And there are some that are like in hieratic, you would sometimes combine glyphs, two glyphs together to make one. I see that here, not necessarily, they're not coming from the hieratic or demotic that way, but it looks like they've done that themselves to some of these glyphs. So they've taken kind of the concept that's used in Egyptian and taken it a little further to further condense certain things. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
The other thing that they're doing, I call it glyphnastics, is when they write this, sometimes they are borrowing, they're using the glyph twice. Like they'll use it at the end, it'll be part of a name, and then they'll use the last glyph in that name and be the first glyph in the next word or something.
Hmm.
So yeah, and so it's kind of a tricky thing they're doing, but again, it all conserves space when you do something like that. And then they do all kinds of kind of interesting things to like they reverse the glyph, which Egyptians did too, but Egyptians did it telling you the way it's going to read mostly is how they had, the glyphs get reversed. It seems like they're doing it to create these little parallel, like the Maya did or Mesoamerica, to kind of be creative in there. Um, so, you have glyphs that are mirroring each other next to each other. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I have noticed. So you're saying that you're seeing that on the characters document,
Yeah.
right?
So, yeah. And so you'd have, let's see if we can find like this one here. So you see, these are almost kind of mirroring each other kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you see some of that. And I have a mark on the cover of my book, I actually, um, well, no, not in the cover, but here I've marked the different types, like dates and numbers and that. In my book, I actually kind of show the parallel structures too. So I have a little thing just like this that kind of calls out each of the parallel ones. You don't see it here, sorry. But
And you're saying that the Egyptians sometimes might have done that as well.
yes, there's evidence that they did that on like their big monumental stuff where they're trying to make something look cool. And the
Hmm.
Maya, they played with their glyphs. They did all kind of weird things with their glyphs just to make them because they were artists. Really, each scribe kind of had sometimes his own little technique to make a particular glyph. It was still legible, but it had like, little fancy things on it and stuff.
That's
And
almost quite interesting that Joseph, or the scribe who then wrote down the characters, that you see some of that in there. If under the critics' view, Joseph just invented the character. Quite interesting
yeah,
that that would have happened.
yeah, exactly. Like I say, if you look at my books, I never ever say, "Hey, Joseph Smith could have never done this," because all my stuff, it's obvious. I don't have to say anything. I mean,
Yeah.
unless I'm not writing to the critics anyway. I don't really care what they. I'm fine if they have comments, but I'm not trying to. I don't write my books responding to all the critics, and I'm not really an apologist, right? In that sense that I'm defending the church or defending someone attacks the church. I don't really care. That's it's just
Have
my
you
own
had
research.
any critics that have reached out after our part one? Well, I'll have to relook through some of the
No,
comments. I'm sure
I
there's
well
been.
maybe in the comments they did, but again, a lot of them. I always just said, "Did you read the book?" I don't have to read the book. I know that the Book of Mormon is fake. Okay, so I guess why are you even watching the podcast? The podcast.
Yeah.
I
No,
know. If you
I'd
already
be
know, why the heck
interested.
do you watch it?
I'd be interested in a critic or a critical scholar who's either read through your book or watched the episode, who would have maybe a more informed response. I'd be interested to see what they would have to say. But at this
I'm
point,
I'm
I'm not
I'm
aware of any.
I'm yeah, I'm all about respond. Again, my book, this one was reviewed by an Egyptologist that said, "Yep, your use of hieratic in the dictionary is all correct." I'm not saying, and I had a Maya person says, "Yeah, that's actually correct. You know, what you're talking about, the Maya glyphs is correct." And then I had Sumerian. Those are non-LDS review some of the Sumerian, not the character. They didn't say it was the characters document, but the glyph forms, right? Because that's the problem. Is I've sent it out. Oh, this is great. And then they find out it's from the Book of Mormon. They go, oh, well,
Hmm. So,
another
we
chart.
support your
I've had,
methodology and your approach, but we won't support your findings or conclusions.
yeah, I've had a lot of Charles Anthon moments, is what I call them. So
That's
where they
that's
where they
cool.
actually agree with all my stuff, then they find out, oh, what it's doing, and then they're like, oh, I can't really, I don't want to. I mean, there's a couple guys. One guy basically reviewed it, the Swords of Shul book, and which has some stuff about names, and he kind of said, he goes, well, he goes, that Joseph Smith stuff, that's all a bunch of B blank, bull. He goes, but it does look like some kind of ancient text, to be honest with you. So I have had people that said,
Wow.
yeah, that there's something going on, they won't go to the point of like, and that's the other thing. A lot of people is like, so are archaeologists using the Book of Mormon in Mesoamerica to find things? I'm like, well, what archaeologist is going to use a book we don't have given to somebody by an angel and cite that in their archaeological research?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, these premises that they come up with is like, of course, that's just a stupid question. Like it's some attack on the Book of Mormon. It's like, no, it's just because that's the nature of where it came from.
I feel like
So
another methodology or approach, like I think what John Sorensen or Brent Gardner did, was to like look at the scholarship that's been done on Mesoamerica and what they're saying about the Mayans, and then let's see, does this correlate? Does this converge with what we're seeing in the Book of Mormon?
yeah, and even like this translation, because another kind of critic has come up with a video or something saying, oh, some of these glyphs came from Roman script. He looked at everything except Hieratic Egyptian. That was interesting. And some shorthand. So why didn't you include his work? I'm like, well, he assumed that it was not translatable. It was just Joseph Smith just cobbled together some glyphs from some other languages or something at the time. And so I'm like, yeah, if you want to pursue that, that's fine. But if you're translating something, well, you can't assume that. You've got to try to translate it and assume what it is. So it's like, yeah, I don't really discuss all the alternate theories of of the characters dogma. I'm just saying this is, if you're going to translate it, you have to assume that it is what it is. If it wasn't translatable, then maybe you start looking at these other things. But why not try to translate it? And there really hadn't been hardly any work on it, to be honest with you, which was surprising. So
It's interesting those responses from scholars, because I believe there was a scholar, Harold Bloom, who said of like Joseph's like Book of Enoch, and how there is some correspondence to like ancient documents that they have with the Book of Enoch. I think the Book of Giants had like some very strong correspondences, and he was quite impressed. I think he just chalked it up to Joseph as a bit of a religious genius.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I think it's kind of interesting that some scholars have at least acknowledged that there's some ancient things that they can see in there. Like even some of the ancient names in the Book of Mormon, like Hebrew or Egyptian names, is quite interesting.
Yeah. And so I guess what I'm saying is I know I didn't discuss all of the alternate theories of the Book of Mormon. You know, because I'm just saying, hey, if it is, all I have is I have this characters document. It's clearly there's Egyptian in there. Let's see if we can translate it, right?
Yeah.
And if I can, well, and give you a reasonable translation and it's academic grade and it uses all the standard resources with some modification. I mean, you got to understand it. It's 1,000 year sitting in some other culture, right? So there may have been some modifications made. You'd expect that. Like in English, there are certain letters we don't have anymore that were used 200 years ago, um, that just came out of, came out of fashion. So they just stopped using them, like Yoth and a few other ones. So anyway, so we'll get into it. So here's a few more of what I call calendar glyphs. These are mostly just the measurement of time glyphs, not the specific calendars. And so days, it appears a dot can represent days in the characters document. And Egyptian hieratic glyph for a day is either a circle with a dot in the center or a small circle. So the simple dot would be a shorthand version of that glyph. Um, I didn't really give examples because dots are not, you can imagine what a dot looks
Yeah, you don't have to see a dot.
like. Right. The
I would
year,
say for people who are listening to this, this is definitely the sort of episode where you can listen to it, but you'll probably get more out of it if you watch this video as well, because it's quite a visual presentation.
right. I apologize. There's no way to really put the glyphs in sound
Yeah,
form.
no, it would be painful for us to try to describe every glyph.
Yeah, yeah. And so the years, the regular is the word years, is typically it's just implied when you have a date, it doesn't say years, it just has like a calendar marker. Um, but there is one place where when they did the 9 year retroactive change to the calendar after the birth of Christ, change. I mean, they went from a lunar year to a solar year, is what I'm saying. And so you have this glyph. The word for Egyptian, um, is, and I don't pronounce Egyptian very well, so it's just RNPT. I'll just spell it out. Actually, and it consists of this Gardner number glyph X1 and Z1, both to the side of an M4. And so I just show you the combined. I didn't show you the Gardner number, but um, these are the hieratic version of it. It's not quite, as you can see, it's got a little the little C thing on this end. It's kind of got a line. It is a little bit different. So um, I think it's a morphed glyph, to be honest with you. It's because I've morphed two of these two together and
Right.
gotten. So it's one of those glyphs that, again, it's you can see it in the Egyptian. It's got parts of it in the Egyptian, but it's obviously been I call them variants. So you have an
Yeah,
Egyptian reckon.
it's not an identical match.
Yeah, and actually, even in hieratic, they had different scribal schools, different people. So there was actually quite some variation, even just in the language itself, right? So they call them variants, meaning it looks like it's pretty close to the glyph, but not. And okay, and that's kind of why I say it looks to be a morphed glyph where they've
Hmm.
taken two and pushed together. The word month is used in two locations, C103, C160 in the characters document. Um, and then, so I show you the two standard Egyptian hieroglyphs for month are this N12, and then the Mueller number is a 308 over here. So it has the same form. It has a dot in it, which is interesting. Um, the Sumerian proto-cuneiform actually has the same, which I don't think anybody's really pointed out in the literature with the Egyptian. It has the same basically glyph as the Egyptian for month, but they put a dot in it to actually give you the number of months. So I'm not sure it's
Oh.
quite used that way, but so you can kind of see the
Yeah, it's definitely quite similar.
yeah, yeah. They've, there may be something to this dash or something, if it's got that on, that means half month or something. I don't, the reality is there's some things I just can't really tell if that's just a variation of the person who copied it or whether it was, exactly that way on the plates. So
So
that's
it's
not,
very similar to its two standard Egyptian hieroglyphs.
yeah. So this N12 is the monumental, like you find. That's how they depict a month. Sometimes the shorthand isn't all that different, right? So this is the monumental, this N12, and then this is the shorthand hieratic.
Hmm.
You see, so and I gave you this number. That's the Mueller. So that they take the hieratic or that's the Mueller number. I just show that. This is right out. Again, I cut and paste right out of the dictionaries, right? I'm not drawing anything. I'm not fudging anything. You can just see for yourself what they look like.
Okay.
So, yeah. So that's the word for month, not, would I say year? Well, I must no, I think I said month. Sometimes I get too confused. I'm getting thinking three thoughts at once. And so, there's also an additional month glyph in the characters document um, that was used related to King Benjamin and his death and that. And it's this character here, the C84. The glyph in Egyptian, hieratic, I'm showing you, is similar. But I flipped it upside down. So this is, and you can see it's, um,
Similar shape. Yeah.
yep, very close. And there's another one that's a permutation of the glyph, and it's flipped to its side. And actually, what is happening there as I went through it, they're rotating the glyph as they're going to it's a jubilee. It's representing the jubilee year, although it originated as a sign for a month. It looks like it's representing a jubilee year. So they've taken a glyph, and this glyph also another form of it means jubilee in the Egyptian. I show that, we showed that previously. We talked about that, but it looks what they're doing is they're kind of rotating for each sequential jubilee year. It rotates one quarter turn. That's in my book, so it's kind of interesting,
Hmm.
and it also is very similar to what we'll talk about in the Mormon glyph, and that's why. And actually, in the year count, since now I know the year counts, I looked at it, and Mormon was born on Jubilee year, so his glyph is actually
Oh.
similar. So kind of interesting.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay.
this the one of the months I think in the Nephite calendar. It's basically only this is only one place. It's in the Lehi, the 600-year count. That actually is a Paleo Hebrew, so there is a little bit of Hebrew, and it's found on a calendar, the Gezer calendar, um, in the old world, 925 BC. So it's the second month, or because they. So what I'm telling you is there it is consistent with what the Hebrew um, letter indicated. A lot of people don't realize, but the the Hebrew numbers that they had really, for the most part, were just hieratic that they found pre-exile, right? After the exile, they changed their numbers so that each letter in the Hebrew alphabet represented a number one, two, three. So they started using letters to represent their numbers.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, so we're kind of looking back into an area that we don't have a lot of information as to what the Paleo Hebrew. I do think it kind of shows that, and what they did, um, at least we know post exile is that's why some people look at a word in the Bible and they can actually make a number out of it because each letter has a number. It's called gematria. And so they had all these different, meanings that they could assign. And so the Hebrews were using these numbers that way. I do think it predated the exile. I mean, they were doing some of these things before they were using the letters um, for, each number, but they had some in their calendar. So some of the letters were used in their calendar.
Gotcha.
Um, and then for the 12th month, again, that's why I'm thinking that where I'm seeing when they're giving a number to a month, they're using the Paleo Hebrew. So I do think that's probably what they used for their months. And interestingly enough, The Bible only uses numbers for their months, except for like when they were building Solomon's temple. And then they borrowed some month names out of Canaan. Um, but they just use the first month, second month, third month. That's what they just use a number. They don't name them. And that's exactly what the Book of Mormon does. So it's actually following the biblical pattern. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So they're borrowing either some Egyptian hieratic looking symbols or characters and a couple of Paleo Hebrew ones for either a certain months, like
Yeah.
1 month, 2 months, and that bottom one is 12 months or the
Well, I
12th.
think, yeah, I think what's happening is like the months is the one on the top wasn't really borrowed as a month. It was borrowed as the Jubilee marker or the Jubilee year marker.
Oh, okay.
It is a glyph. It is a calendar glyph, but it's not doing the same thing. So I do think they were applying it. They were taking calendrical markers sometimes and applying them differently. They used the Paleo Hebrew pretty much exclusively for the months, and
Right.
probably they did number them. Um, what I'm saying is, what I'm trying to say is that they probably did use the Paleo Hebrew to represent numbers. Sorry about that. But did not, they're probably doing this practice prior to the exile, a certain portion of it, right? That they actually did have numbers assigned to the months. That's kind of what it says, because it says the first month, second month, third month. We don't know how those in the biblical Hebrew would have delineated those pre-exile. We don't have any text, pre-exile of the Bible. So anyway, what I'm saying is actually fitting the Old Testament, probably what you might expect in the Paleo Hebrew. So it's not inconsistent with it, and they're clearly Paleo Hebrew glyphs. You can see the Paleo Hebrew letters, and they're designating different numbered months.
Alrighty.
Okay, let's get into personal names. Now, one thing we need to talk about, personal names in the Book of Mormon, or all names, even place names, and we're told that actually mean something. And just like our names do too. Most people don't know that, but their name actually has a meaning, right? And it derived from some language and has some meaning. Like Grover, most people think, well, as somebody takes care of an orchard. It's actually looks like it comes from a version of governor that got shortened. So our like Smith, that was taken because that was the trade that the person worked in. You didn't have last names in English till I can't remember the Council of Trent, I think, or something where they required people to start getting last names because there were too many Johns and stuff. So, so a lot of them just took the place name where they lived or what the trade they were in as their last name. Murphy, I don't know what that is, but
I have to look that up. I can't remember. I'm sure I've looked up the meaning of both my first name and last name, but actually I can't remember.
I thought it meant something like genius or something like
Oh
that.
yeah, must do. Handsome. I think handsome and genius.
Well, you got to take your pick.
Yeah.
So, so let's
Okay.
get so knowing that when we get into the personal names, you'll see that they have what I do is there's what's called the Book of Mormon Onomasticon. That's a place where it's a BYU website where different people in linguistics have been involved and have tried to like compile all the potential meanings of a particular Book of Mormon name. They don't have hardly any Jaredite because they haven't figured them out. But so I do use that. Um, I go through those. So sometimes they list three possible, meanings of a name. And so when I show I'm referencing the onomasticon, I'm not doing the original research myself, saying this name means this in Hebrew. They've already done that.
I think Matt Bowen, is he the one that's done a lot of work on this?
Well, he's continued. Yeah, he's done his additional work, and he does a lot of it. The onomasticon just basically looking like a meaning of the name. He's taking it and saying, "Hey, there's this pun," and you find it. Jershon means land of inheritance, and then you find that in the text, and in such a way, and it matches some of the biblical uses. So he takes it kind of next level, and then he also has some new ones, like we'll talk about layman. That was one I couldn't really get very good in Egyptian. I was like, "What? This is one that's not really working." Very well in Egyptian. I don't think I don't have the right meaning. And then he came up with unbeliever. Layman means unbeliever, which explains a lot of things in the Book of Mormon, knowing that. And then I looked in the Egyptians, like, well, there it is right there. Straightforward.
So are you saying, or maybe you're going to jump to this, are you saying that one of the meanings of layman in Egyptian is unbeliever.
No, no, in Hebrew. So
Oh, in
so what you
Hebrew.
have is typically you have a Hebrew meaning, and then they're taking Egyptian and writing. They're using they're not like pronouncing it. They're not using the Egyptian to give the same pronunciation. They're using the Egyptian to give the same underlying meaning of the name. Does that make
Right.
sense?
I
I
see.
mean, it may have some similar phonetics. I kind of see that sometimes it looks like they're picking the name because sometimes it almost means the same in Egyptian or in so there's lots of stuff going on in these names. They're obviously constructing them, and some of them there's actually multiple levels of meaning. Like a name can actually have meaning in Hebrew, Egyptian, and in Sumerian, in this constructed Sumerian, which they come up with. And it actually, so it's talking about different features or characteristics of an individual. Does that make sense? So it's actually
Yeah.
a glyph form of this name could actually mean a lot if you because it's actually depicting it in different, you know, it's showing an Egyptian meaning. I mean, it has two meanings, or if you take it phonetically in Sumerian, put it together, it has a meaning matching the individual, a different characteristic of the individual or something.
Right.
Okay, so I'm not taking these in any particular order. This because Mosiah the first is actually the first mentioned in the characters document. I'm just taking them um, just kind of as I felt, I guess. I don't know. Now, Mulek, I'm copying. This is all just copied right out of the onomasticon, and and I put that in there just so people can know. I don't, I'm not, and you can see how they. But I put it in there so you can see how they've derived the name, the meaning of the name. So I'm not doing the derivation there. Um, so what? Then I take it and say, okay, I've got. They show these different meanings. Let me see what I find in the Egyptian. The glyphs that for that name. Now, again, that was a little tricky because you're like, okay, how do I even know this is a name or something? Oftentimes, the names I had to look for because of there's other things in the text. Like I had a death date of King Benjamin. So, okay, I'm guessing Benjamin is there close, right? So, what I'm saying is the names were a little bit trickier because I had to kind of know the meaning of the name and then look for it in the Egyptian. So it couldn't be like, okay, could I take all the names in the Book of Mormon and look at them? That would take forever. So I did use kind of the context and found them, but it did take, that was one thing that did take a while on some of these. So, and then because I had to look at like different ones. So on Masticon says, oh, it could mean this, it could mean this, it could mean this. So I got to look at all those in Egyptian and see if I can find, that it matches the characters document somewhere. So the ones I identified for Mulek is, and I'll just show you the next. So it's these glyphs here, um, the C8, C9, C10, C11. And remember, we're reading from right to left when we're reading. So that's your order of the glyphs. So we'll go back. Um, and so you had C8 is a hieratic sign for walking fish. C9 and part of C10 is the Egyptian word RN to be young and also means name. Part of the C10, because when I say part, I did not assign these numbers to the characters. Sometimes I thought it was, oh, just one character, but it may have been two. When they did the numbers assignment, they didn't know what they were, you know, there's some things like, well, could that just be a part of one glyph and it has two markings? So sometimes there's a little bit of difficulty between the identification of the glyph. And so sometimes I split a glyph, like if it has two features, it was actually probably two glyphs, not one, but they just called it that one. There's a guy named Cowley Ariel Crowley that basically assigned the numbers to the glyphs. I didn't do that. So, and then you have the C10 as a determinative for male. Egyptian had something they would add to a word, like if it's a word like pig, for example. Well, you don't know. Is that a pig, like a police officer slang, or is that pig as an animal, or is it pig that's like, can you be used for a piece of iron? So they would add like an unpronounced glyph to tell you what type it was. So they'd say, um, or a female or a male, right? So some of these determinatives you don't pronounce them, but they put them in there. And um, that word, as it turns for a male, the part of the word also is known to mean male, and um, similar as means Lord, Master, Chief. So knowing that, then we look. Um, One of the definitions that they gave, the onomasticon, um, was young, and I have young male chief. They have little king is the meaning. So that's actually pretty close, right?
Hmm.
Um, and then the walking fish glyph, this kind of more fancy glyph here, is an interesting one because um, it can actually mean like it's like the Mulek has king, but Mulek was not a king in the Book of Mormon. There's no Mulekites, right? It was just the people of Mulek. He was never, and Zarahemla wasn't a king, right? When Mosiah came over, so but they obviously operated. They landed where the Jaredites were and coexisted with the Jaredites for some period of time, and so this actually means like vizier or administrator. Um, uh, Interestingly enough, so in the Egyptian. And I give you these other, and I told you the meanings on the previous slide. Now I'm showing you the glyphs, right? So your C8 matches this. Again, it's slightly different, um, but it's the walking fish. This RN, which I told you about, consists of, this is the hieratic, consists of a line. This is the N35 is a line that matches the C9 um, or the C10 glyph. And then this one here. So you basically have both of those glyphs in that word, which are,
If I'm following correct, so you're showing some Egyptian hieratic characters that sort of give the or provide the meaning
yep.
for
So
the
that,
name Mulek.
right. So this is the word RN, run, which means to be young.
Uh-huh.
And then I'm showing you the glyphs in the characters document, these two.
Yes.
And so these two glyphs are what make up that word RN in Egyptian, and it matches, right? So you have a dash and a vertical kind of slant, and then you have a straight dash there. So so you actually have, so this first one is kind of administrator. I mean, I'll talk about that. And then you have the meaning young, this one here. And that's what
Uh-huh.
I'm saying. Like Crawley called this one glyph. Well, it's actually multiple, right? He said this is just one glyph, but it's not. It's actually three separate glyphs. Could have numbered them. That's all I'm saying. It could have been numbered. Well, this one, he's numbered it as one glyph. So, or this one glyph, the C10. Anyway, that's not to confuse you. It's just I just had to stick with the previous publication. So, and then you have this part of the C10, which you see over here in the demotic, um, meets that HWT, which that word I told you that meant male.
Mm-hmm.
And then this glyph, which is this last one over here, this C11, means HRY. You can see it's not perfect match, but it does curl over and has in the demotic. This one's a pretty good match, this
Yeah, it looks quite similar.
HWT. Yeah. And that means that's where I said that's what means Lord, Master, or Chief. So that's when I said that's why I gave you the definition of young male chief, and here's how I'm showing you um, the Egyptian that matches the character's document that means young male chief.
So you're saying that though these characters here that we can see, the likely translation is either young male chief or young male like little king.
Yeah, well, yeah, little king is what the onomasticon says in Hebrew it means, because
Mhm.
MLK is a king, right? So they're saying Mulek, it's a derivative that means little king. So I'm taking the Hebrew meaning that the onomasticon has given. I'm showing you the meaning in the Reformed Egyptian that matches what they've come up with in the Hebrew.
Hmm.
So if you take the Egyptian, not the phonetics of it, but just the meaning of it, it matches the Hebrew meaning of the name.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, so they're using Egyptian for the meaning. So because they're trying to preserve the phonetics don't mean anything really. It's they mean something, but it's the underlying meanings of the names in the Book of Mormon that is important. And so and it's just like in the Bible, like Jacob. Well, okay, Jacob. Well, what does that mean? That means like trickster, right? Um, why? Well, because of what happened with Esau.
Right, right.
Yeah, and so it's not. I mean, the name is okay, but you wouldn't know unless you know the meaning of that name, what's going on.
So you're saying the name Mulek is preserving the Hebrew meaning
Yep.
of the name?
Yeah, so they're writing it with the Egyptian meaning that means the same as the Hebrew meaning.
Right.
So
That's interesting.
if I read this in Egyptian, it wouldn't be the same phonetically, but it means the same thing.
I
Now,
see.
yeah,
And Mulek it's from my understanding a plausible shortened Hebrew variant for Malkayu, which was like a I think a stamp seal that they found. It,
yeah,
that's like
I'm
one of
not
the
getting
good
into it,
sons of the
but
king. You don't get into that,
yeah.
but I know that's like cited by like
But
Scripture Central as like evidence as well. But this is really interesting.
yeah, if I'd have done that, my book would have been 1,600 pages instead of 500 or something.
Yeah,
So, yeah, I mean, I couldn't. I'm trying to do the translation and limit it to the translation,
yeah.
right?
You
And
just
give
focus on the
I,
translation.
I do additional stuff that gives you kind of some context, maybe in Mesoamerica, what it's meaning, or et cetera. But so this is the basic gist, and we're going to do this on each name. So you're seeing, I'm showing you the glyphs. I'm telling you the name, the meaning of the name in Hebrew. Some names they figured out, like maybe Egyptian names. I don't have any of those, but like in the Book of Mormon has Paankai or something that they say, oh, that's an Egyptian name phonetically. And so they try to find a meaning in Egyptian for that name in the onomasticon. But anyway, so that
Right.
gives
So,
you kind
so,
of the,
so if I'm understanding, there's not a glyph or a character just for Mulek, but there's these you said four glyphs that uh provide sort of the meaning for
yeah.
the name. Is that's what you're saying?
Yeah, and it's called a calc, and it's used in Mesoamerica. The proper name is if you're taking a word from another language, for example, sometimes like pizza, you just take the Italian word and say, oh, it's a pizza, right? You just use the same pronunciation. Well, it's close to our letters and it has the same letters and stuff. But sometimes you're not going to take, you'll take the meaning of it and then put it in your language, the meaning. Meaning, so you're not transliterating. I mean, you're not saying, okay, and you probably saw that, I was an Italian missionary and they would pronounce my name Jerry Groove. They're trying to pronounce it, but my name has a meaning. Like, let's say governor. They could have just used Jerry the governor and used governatore or something.
Right. The
That would
meaning
be
in
that
their
would be a calc.
languages.
That would be a calc, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Where they're not trying to take the phonetics, the pronunciation. They're just taking the meaning of it and in their own language.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, they weren't supposed to use my first name in, as a
On
missionary.
your mission, yeah. Just
Yeah,
elder.
so yeah, elder. I just told them when they really pushed me, the young girls, I said Theth, which they can't pronounce THs. So then they would just default to elder. That's probably not that honest, just Forrest Gump, little white lie kind of thing. So,
Okay,
okay.
so that's the name Mulek.
Yeah. And so that walking fish is kind of a word for administrator of a province or something. And also it can mean excavator of canals, which we'll get into. So it actually makes sense. The walking fish is not really part of Mulek's name, but it's a title for him. We know he wasn't a king, but he existed as some sort of leader. So he's probably like a vassal king. So this glyph would have been perfectly appropriate for what he did in the Book of Mormon. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
So now we're going to get into something kind of, I hope we can follow, but um, well, as noted previously, that was in my book. Should have copied that over. But um, there are some um, glyphs matching part of Mulek's name that are signs for fish. We have they have a fish sitting on top of these walking legs, right? That, that, that's what I called this glyph here. You see that? That's the monumental version of it. It's got these legs with a fish on top. So, and um, as we talked about last time, we didn't really point this out, but the Maya, these PDI and ADI glyphs, which we find in the Maya, is an infix of Egyptian into their Maya glyph form. The rest of the glyph typically is a fish. So, and the name is Mulak in the Maya for that, for fish. So it's actually phonetic. There's some phonetically something maybe going on here. And again, I'm trying to put it in maybe a mess. I'm giving some Mesoamerican elements or angles to it. Not the translation, but just, hey, let's something fishy about Mulek is what I say. So so it actually, in the Maya it says fish, and we're seeing that in the glyphs, and the way they pronounce it is Mulak, you know. So it seems to have some phonetic link.
Right. Yeah.
And here they are. So you have this little fish here, and these are sharks. These are
Oh, really?
the glyphs we talked about last time. Um, so these are the came to pass glyphs,
Yeah.
the ADI, PDI with those little things on it. So they actually have a fish on them. So that is, and Mayanist David Kelly connected um, 3 day names in the Maya calendar correspond to 3 sequential Hebrew letters, which I found that interesting because I also found that the month numbers are sequential in the Hebrew. So and he shows that the day names in the Maya calendar match the meaning of them, match the names, the Hebrew letters, 3 sequential letters. So um, again, it's kind of getting into the weeds,
Yeah.
but it's kind of interesting because the um, down in the area where we think Mulek was in the Mesoamerican models, um, where he landed, because we know he landed in land of desolation, so he's up in Jaredite lands. It's actually kind of a swampy, watery, rivery location. Um, and we see they have the kings there. Nobody's translated this. This is Epa Olmec, this language. Somebody's tried, but we don't have a lot of examples of it. So this isn't Mayan. This is Epa Olmec. And they have these fish on their headdresses, right? Um, so we have some. I'm just showing some interesting correlations in Mesoamerica with this name. And so can we? So the question is, can we find anything else that maybe as a walking fish title for Mulek? And Sorensen basically in his book said that there's one stela in Laventa that's in this area that looks like it's an encountering of some sort of foreign looking leader, right? Um, go there. It's this one here. He has a beard, big Roman nose, and it looks like they're encountering, some encounter between 2 groups. Is kind of the interpretation of this. Not only Sorensen, but others. And kind of the interesting thing is he has a fish headdress. He's a walking fish. So I think maybe that's why his designation in Mesoamerica was the walking fish. I mean, he was an administrator, but it represented his headdress. So anyway, kind of out in the weeds a little bit, but kind of interesting.
Hmm. Okay.
And then actually, I just kind of show the chronology, and you would have had the overlap. This is basically when Mulek would have overlapped during that time frame, and it matches the um, time frame. I'm not going to necessarily go into it. I'm just have show it as a slide if people want to look at it. Show that they're, you know, the stele, the date of the stele of the guess does match the time when Mulek would have been there chronologically. Um, so it's consistent with the Olmec. He was there before the Olmec, the Jaredite destruction. Um, this is another stela at La Venta, which archaeologists, at least some, have indicated this. They do think this is a foreign leader as well, because it has kind of this Phoenician Middle East looking headdress, and it has this the foot, which means traveler in Mesoamerican languages. Not necessarily Maya, but like Aztec have it and others. So some have proposed that yeah, this maybe looks like it's some sort of foreign leader, um, foreign person. And actually, if you look at the chronology of this stela, it matches the time when Mulek would have been there. So
Hmm.
um,
It's interesting because I think I can't remember if in the Book of Mosiah or where, but I know the Book of Mormon talks about like Coriantumr's stone likely being like a stela with the last king of the Jaredite, and the thing talks about like his wars and things, and others, similar stela in
yeah,
Mesoamerica.
right. And that's the other thing is we always look at that. Okay, there were two people left, and they were all killed, and just Coriantumr left. Well, somebody had to make his stone. So,
Yeah.
meaning there were others there, and not everybody was totally wiped out, but the kingly line was wiped out, and the primary cultural line was wiped out.
Yeah,
That's how
because we,
you,
we kind of think in our heads that like when the Nephites arrive, the Jaredites are completely wiped out. That's the way we view it. But uh Coriantumr, he was there with the Mulekites at that time, wasn't he?
yeah, he coexisted, and it actually talked about the Mulekites. Well, the people of Zarahemla. Now we don't. They were probably just a subset of Mulek, right? Because they came up from the South Wilderness, and which was, but it says that they suffered much by the sword or something in Omni. So they
Mm.
were probably, that's probably why they left, is there was this big civil war. They weren't really, they were just probably a vassal king to Coriantumr or something, that meaning, but they, at least a portion of them weren't involved, left, got out of there. But Coriantumr saw them later after the civil war was over, and they were friendly to him because previously they probably knew him, that type of thing. Again,
Mm.
you're kind of reading between the lines here, and also the story is a little bit mythical, and this is not myth, but it's the whole battle, the last battle. I mean, you kind of know because it says Shiz went south to gather his armies for 4 years in Ogath, which that's a biblical. Og was the last giant. It was a giant who attacked Moses, and then all his people were killed, and then his head was cut off. Gath, so you have two parts of that word, Og, Ogath. The place of Ogath is where Shiz went, but Gath is Goliath, and his five brothers are all giants, and Goliath got his head cut off. And so you have this final story of Shiz, all his people and his head being cut off. So there's some biblical typology even going on with some of the names. So that's another thing. And they may not be meaning something, but if you can construct them out of biblical names, then you can understand what they're talking about.
Hmm.
So
Ooh.
that was a Don Bradley idea that I kind of showed in Mesoamerica how it works. Because Ogath, where he went, where it makes sense, is where all the big, huge, colossal heads are of the Olmec. So it makes sense that it's the giants. That's the land of the giants. Anyway, so I kind of just show you that, yeah, that Mulek, and then the group came up out of the Olmec area up into, and the Book of Mormon models, the Sorensen model has Chiapa de Corzo, Mexico, as Sidon. So the people of Zarahemla came up, and there was a cylinder seal found there with an Egyptian glyph. And there, if you roll it out, I'd actually rendered a translation of it. But here you can see the Egyptian glyph that matches the glyph that they're talking about on the cylinder seal. So there is some trace evidence, I think, of Egyptian in Mesoamerica, if you know what you're looking for. Um, Now let's kind of go. I was going to just kind of, I thought a little side note here is we talked about La Venta. It looks like it's the city of Lib, and Sorensen has Mulek is the city of Lib. It's the later name the Nephites assigned to it, and so it is a Olmec known Olmec site. Um, it's located next to an estuary of the ocean, so it basically matches the sea divides the land concept down here. And they have four of these colossal heads there, and it actually matches what the Book of Mormon, the number of leaders you would expect. Um, this head and lib in the Sumerian, I kind of show means to be happy, well off. It also part of it means middle, and it's kind of interesting because then you have the head, the only smiling head of all the Olmec's heads is at La Venta, and it sits in the middle. So it kind of looks like maybe that name is talking about the head. It's describing the head itself. The leader is represented in his depiction because these are known to be rulers. They don't really know what their names are, but they have guessed those are ruling line leaders because one and a lot of them have been chopped up or have been marks made on them and defaced because when they say there was a civil war of some sort. So it actually matches the end of the Jaredites pretty well archaeologically.
Right, explain that to me one more time. So it's Lib, that's a Jaredite name. Explain this
Yeah,
one more time.
that's a key. Yeah, the city of Lib. You had Lib go down. He was the hunter or whatever.
Yeah.
Founded this city, which Book of Mormon model shows La Venta. Basically, if you're using the geography, right? I kind of show
Ah,
it actually
okay.
matches better. It matches better because it says it was near where the sea divides the land is where the city was, and there's an estuary right there. So
Levant is what's called geographically in Mesoamerica.
yeah, that's the name it's given to.
Right, that's the name it's given.
Yeah, the wind, right? So, but it's not the Olmec. They don't know the Olmec language. It looks like there's some script, but nobody knows what it is. So nobody knows what they called it. That's the thing. Most Mesoamerican cities, they don't know what they called it. That's what people say. Oh, why can't you show me the city of Nephi? It's like, well, the archaeologists don't even know what it was called. So how can you expect me to
Yeah,
try to
that's
start
interesting. They
matching
don't
up
know the name of the
names?
cities.
Yeah,
Right, right.
exactly. That's a big criticism. Like you don't even know anything about Mesoamerican archaeology when you say crap like that. So um, anyway, so basically, yeah, I'm showing here's lib, here's the meaning in Sumerian.
So it means to be happy and in the middle in
Yeah,
Sumerian.
right. And then if you find, and then at La Venta, you have a ruler. There's only four of them there, and he's in the middle, and he's got this goofy smile, happy smile, And so I actually think maybe some of the names were actually not necessarily their original names, but maybe the Nephites signed them based on the seeing the ruler or something like that, what he looked like. So just
Hmm.
kind of my pet theory. So
Okay.
and I actually show it in the Swords of Shul book where I go through each of the different colossal heads and show which king they link to in the Book of Mormon.
Well, we'll have to do an episode on that at some
Yeah,
point.
yeah, this was just a
That's kind of
diversion.
new. This is
This was
kind
just
of
a
new to me.
diversion because you're getting sick of Reformed Egyptian, so I just thought I'd give you something that had like nice fun, good pictures and interest, something people can like look at.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
Xana,
not part of the characters
nope,
document.
not at all.
I was thinking of that because I was like, is Lib
Nope.
in there? Right.
No, but it's giving you the meaning, the name meaning, the
Yeah,
same thing, right?
that's
Same
interesting.
concept that every name has a meaning, and some of the meanings maybe are actually represented in the Mesoamerican. I can find them maybe in Mesoamerican, just like Mulek. So I'm kind of showing,
Mhm.
okay, here's Mulek, but you're seeing fish, you're seeing the headdress of a fish being carried by somebody, a leader at the time that matches Mulek's chronology. So I'm kind of saying, showing you that maybe there is some links to that name in Mesoamerica, even though we don't know the name of that particular. The archaeologists don't know the name, but maybe we can show that it does link. Um, this one, the S Zenith Onomasticon has elements of proper uh, of an Egyptian proper name, so it's not. It'd be like kind of a designation of a proper name, uh, and that word SMB, which they say, here's the character for it in the characters document. And I do show some other potential other meanings that would at least phonetically match the Egyptian Seneb, because they're calling it an Egyptian, as Nibley is saying this Senef seems to be an Egyptian name, not a Hebrew name. So I took a little liberty there saying, well, there are actually a few another one, Seneb, um, which means to be overthrown, to be evilly entreated. Again, things that might match um, Zenith's story a little bit. So I'm saying, okay, he's got that. Well, maybe I'll look at this other one, Seneb. Um, uh, and then I again go to show the Egyptian glyphs that make up that word I've just told you, and then kind of show you basically have a line, you have a glyph that can be flipped to give you a similar with a line. So it looks like a combination glyph. So it could mean that SMB word as well as, and it mirrors another glyph that means depart. So, um, and the hieratic, I didn't show, actually, I should have showed you the hieratic that this SMB, it's actually just a little 3 in so it actually matches almost exactly. I didn't really depict, I should have, but, so what Nibley's saying matches the glyph, at least the little 3, that it's just a proper name that they add. But I actually showed you, well, they may have some other additional meanings that match that would make sense. That has the same glyph form, like a line combined with with a a little 3. Again, this one isn't too exciting, but
All right.
okay. Okay, then we have the Mosiah. There's Mosiah 1, and this is coming off that. Remember, I told you there was another example of the characters document that actually had additional characters because the characters document is washed out or there's missing paper on the right side of it. This is what we find. This is some missing glyphs off of that other example that we have later of the characters. That was
Oh,
in part
okay.
one. We talked. Remember that there was a newspaper broadside, and so I wanted to make sure it was complete. So I got so these characters were on the or washed out of the right side of the characters document. You can kind of vaguely see the traces of them, but there was actually some damage on that side. So there were a few glyphs that we didn't have. We can look at this other example and find that, oh yes, here they are that are missing on the edge. And as you can see, so you have here's the word for Mosiah. Of course, they've copied it slightly differently on that other version, but the dot meaning 1, so that'd be, we know that's Mosiah 1. But also Mosiah 2 has the same name. When I say 2, meaning this is the one that left land of Nephi, right? Came to Zarahemla. This is his grandson because you have Benjamin in between, right?
Yeah,
So,
that's right.
so when I say Mosiah 2, it's meaning the second Mosiah
King
referred to it.
Benjamin's son.
Yep.
Right.
So, and then the onomasticon, because this number also means first or 1, so it actually makes sense. And then, so you have the onomasticon saying it means derived from MSH, the Hebrew MSH meaning Messiah. Again, I'm not going to try to pronounce because I don't speak Hebrew. And so then we start looking at, okay, so we're trying to find something close to Messiah, means something like Messiah. The phonetic word for son in Egyptian is this S with these little kind of alephs. The corresponding hieratic, these are the G30, to make up this word is this G39 followed by an A1. And so here are the hieratic G39, here's the A1, the different forms of that glyph in the hieratic. Again, you can see there's some variation obviously here. And because hieratic changed a little bit through time too. So because they use it for as long as the as the hieroglyphs, the monumental hieroglyphs were used. Hieratic existed, so thousands of years of hieratic. And so, as I previously showed, this curly six thing kind of means God in the previous um, when I was looking at the we talked about that in the um, previous presentation, and there's it means an L, the name of L, God, and well, I think we'll see that when I get to Samuel too. And so you have kind of the name of God's son, right? Is what you
So,
have.
okay. So those two characters had the L looking one, and
That means son. Yeah, these
that
two over
means
here.
okay.
Yeah, I showed you those two glyphs together.
Oh yeah, because there's two glyphs there.
Yeah. So that
Okay.
means son, and that means God's son. So it's basically Messiah, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I kind of show you actually the name of there's another glyph form where it talks about the 20,000. That's a 20,000 number. And this means children. You're not seeing that in the book. I have it, but, but you could also derive the basically the children of Mosiah out of that as well. So, meaning you kind of have this, and this match Mosiah, right? But they're using this is the glyph for 20,000. You might remember that because that was kind of a peculiar glyph, but it's been like
Yeah.
slightly, it's like, so what he's doing is I call it glyphnastics. So if you take those three glyphs, it means Mosiah. So all this together would mean 20,000. This itself also means children, this form. So it's kind of like they're taking and saying, the 20,000 children of Mosiah. Again, they're kind of use so that's why you get a term like that all in just four glyphs because they're using I call it glyphnastics, where they're sometimes borrowing from an adjacent character, a glyph, or slightly modifying it to make that meaning. Anyway,
Okay.
yeah. So that's just telling you the same thing, what I just told you. And it's Book of Mormon, they call them children of Lehi, children of Nephi. So calling them the children of Mosiah, even though the Book of Mormon um, doesn't necessarily say that, that's certainly a reasonable meaning, you know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
They might have called them that. We don't have that section in the Book of Mormon, so we don't really know what we have just Omni where it says that they left and whoever would come with them. We don't have it really
And it may not
expansive.
be referring to like literal children, like descendants, but sort of like the followers of the people of
Yeah,
Messiah.
yeah, and that's what I'm saying. You find the followers called children. So it's okay. So again, these are like I say, they get a little complicated, and then that's one reason I'm talking about them with some detail because it's not just as straightforward. Other glyphs is like that means mountain. Here's mountain, So we're dealing with a little bit more of the complex glyphs. But so this is the name of King Benjamin. Um, the Book of Mormon Massacon suggests the meaning son of the right. Until they tell you how they arrive at that, Benjamin meaning that. Um, I said there appears to be a significant of phonetic and definitional wordplay going on with this name. Um, so these are the C64, C65, 66, 67, and um, excuse me. So 64, 65, I'm calling one character actually. He called them two, but they're really one. And it looks to be a variant of this glyph. You kind of see version is kind of it's not perfect, but it does have the elements. And it also has the phonetic sound M um, in the Egyptian. So then we're looking at this. Um, let's see where we at here. Yeah. So this glyph like I mentioned, you have this has a sound M. Then for your other glyphs, you have for the other, yeah, and this again, this is one that doesn't correlate that well, but it, then the last glyph here does match this to some a version of this to some extent. So it does make the so it does give you the meaning, the the same meaning, and it also gives you actually a phonetic meaning that matches what this MN, this min, which is the version of last part of the of King Benjamin's name. So,
Mm.
and also this G7 is a determinative for king. Um, and it also is an emblem, ideogram for west and related words such as right hand or right side. So what I'm telling you is, so you have the king right on the right hand, and that's the meaning, son of the right hand. So
Right, that's the meaning of King Benjamin's name.
right, and so yes, you do find the glyph forms, at least, that's pretty good. That's a mix. That's not necessarily perfect, but you can at least get it out of that. So, um, and then I talk about how where because it's this MN, you can read it the same forward and backward. So again, we're not going to go too much into that, but so that's a name that seemed to match. Again, there's one glyph, maybe not the best, but uh, like I said, I've never said the translation is like perfectly exactly erratic, but it is primary. It does match pretty well. This one, Samuel the Lamanite. The Book of Mormon identifies Samuel as being from the Hebrew Shmuel, so it means his name is El, right? Actually, you find that name in Egyptian of like I think it's a slave. I've got the book where there are certain names, Hebrew names, that they do identify in Egyptian texts. Maybe it's a slave of that name or a foreign king or something like that. And so the hieratic there is means name. So they've given it a hieratic name. They've assigned a meaning they've assigned again taken the meaning and assigned the Egyptian to it. So what I'm saying is this is a step I'm not doing. This is what was also been already been determined that that's what it means in Egyptian because that name is actually seen in Egyptian. Um, so you can derive this glyph out of that. Um, so you have that little. This is the standard form in Egyptian for that word for the name Samuel. Okay, so you already have the little curly thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have the hockey stick kind of thing. You can see that. So this is again his whole name is kind of a combination glyph if you want to call it that. And um, and then this A3 in the hieratic is this. So that's kind of where you get the tree form, if you want to call it that. So you have all three elements in that as a combination glyph of the word Samuel as indicated in Egyptian. That's the Egyptian name for Samuel. So we're not converting the meaning. They've already done the mean. They've already converted that name into Egyptian. The Egyptians have. So I'm not doing that. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Yeah.
Quite
So that
sweet.
yeah. So this V1 T14 A3 that is the name for Samuel in Egyptian that
In
you find.
Egyptian. Right.
Yeah, that you find in this on this papyri in 1200 BC. So
Okay.
it's a name that was known. And so then I'm just taking that, saying, okay, that is what the Egyptians are telling us Samuel is. And they are, the Hebrew makes sense because it's the name of God. It's the name is El. They're saying the name is El. The Egyptian word for Samuel basically means name. So they're basically just, again, taking the meaning and putting it into, they probably aren't listing the God, but we know that that also means God in other parts of the characters document. So, um, then the so that's the Samuel. We're going to talk about this glyph, the Lamanite, later, or Laman. That's a that. This is interesting because the this means tribe. This means layman. So it's like Samuel the Lamanite. But
Mm-hmm.
so we have the word, we have the name Samuel, and then I show you that it's consistent with Samuel the Lamanite.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense? And we'll get to that layman
And
word.
why is he referenced if this is like maybe like the introduction to Mosiah in your
No,
translation
no, this glyph is found in that second part. It's actually one of the first glyphs in the second part.
in the
So
second part?
that's it. Actually starts with Samuel the Lamanite's prophecy on that prophetic calendar.
Oh, okay. Right.
Yeah. So,
So from a different part of the Book of Mormon.
yep. Yeah. So, yeah, the prophetic calendar, that second part starts at Samuel the Lamanite and ends at 384. So it ends at the final, just before the final battle. So it does
Okay.
have, so that's why I say there's probably a part before that. I mean, when they were copying, they only copied a section. They missed probably, there was probably part starting from the very beginning of the, Lehi departure or something, but we don't have it. That's one reason I think the translation is correct. It's like it's not, they necessarily wouldn't have known, you know. Oh yeah, let's copy this section that's a complete section, right? Because they don't know what the text says. So they're just copying all this, where they chose to copy. I think they copied it off the front part of the Book of Mormon because there was a, okay. So then we have Nephi, the name Nephi, and there's two of them, Nephi 2 and 3. So I'm
I'm
going,
kind of amazed that all these names are in the characters document because it's just a
well,
few lines, but all of these names are being referenced.
well, one reason is because as I mentioned, it's a prophetic calendar. So um yeah, so sometimes they are mentioning like um Nephi, like it's saying when they did the change, it says Nephi left, is departed. So it's not necessarily all the dates of the prophecies, but there are significant events that are being mentioned in that second part.
Okay.
So, and as I say, when we get to it, when we actually get to the final part where the exam is, or when we do the fourth version of this, then when we'll put the whole translation together, I'll show you all of the words that we've already translated and then you can actually see the flow of the translation better.
Okay.
But it is kind of important because the names I have to kind of show you they're different. They're not just, oh, here's what it is in Egyptian. You have to know the meaning potentially in Hebrew or where it's coming from, and then look at the glyph forms. Does that
Then
make
yeah,
sense?
then find the character, right?
So yeah, so that's what I'm saying. This is kind of a complex part of the translation,
Yeah, this
but I
is
mean,
really complex.
yeah,
I
and so
would much rather have just read from a stone the translation.
well, and that's what I'm saying. It's not. Some people says, "Oh, you just this glyph means this." It's like, no, it's not that simple, and you wouldn't expect it to be. Um,
Yeah, you're having to find the meaning of the names in, either Hebrew or Egyptian, and look at the glyphs that
right.
might correspond.
And we know the name means good or beautiful, and we're going to show later when we get to the tribal names. I'm going to show you the actual name of the first Nephi, because that's what the name of the tribe was. These are just the two individuals named Nephi. So there is one more additional Nephi, but it's he's only mentioned. He's not mentioned individually because he's obviously way too early, right?
Hmm.
But the term Nephite has his name in it. It's actually changed by Benjamin, I'm proposing, but that we do find and the other thing we know is that Nephi we know had different glyph forms because the original text of the Book of Mormon does not number the books of Nephi. It's just the Book of Nephi, Book of Nephi, Book of Nephi, Book of Nephi. Doesn't say first, second, third, or fourth Nephi. That was added. The
Oh,
original text doesn't have that. Yeah, they numbered them afterward because they were trying to. So what that tells us is that probably the name, even though phonetically it's the same, the underlying glyph was different. It'd be like my name, Jerry, right? But you can spell it Jery or Geri. So so you actually have a name, but it looks like in order to designate those, the only way that would make sense is that there's on the plates, there was a glyph form that was different, telling you that's a different book of Nephi. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
yeah, yeah.
And so, and so these forms here, um, they match, they match a prefix that means beautiful because we know Nefer means good or beautiful, and we see that in the Book of Mormon, where he says "goodly parent." I mean, you can kind of see, and I think Bowen writes about that too. That there's something more going on here. That the name is being used to describe him, and
I think it describes his people as good and fair as well.
yeah, exactly. So, um, and so this form here, and that's the form of that prefix for that has that to be great, beautiful, excellent, good, pleasing. So it's a reverse match, not, um, and then I just kind of point out it also one reason why it probably got flipped is because there's another, it means it also has this departed next to it. So it forms kind of a parallel word, meaning a glyph form. So sometimes they're doing things with the glyph to make them look different. I don't know that I understand all of what they've done, but it does seem like they're playing with them to flip them, or put them in position so they're making parallel, either mirror or duplicative glyphs next to them. Kind of I call it glyphnastics. I don't. Okay, so that's Nephi, that form of Nephi of those two. Okay, um, the Book of Mormon on a Massacre listed a bunch of things for laymen. That's why the first this is not in the book, because I didn't really find any good matches. I kind of proposed some things. There were some, Lamani, meaning crocodile, and the Maya and stuff, but so it corresponded with Mesoamerica and some of the things. But Matthew Brown has it as proposed as no faith. It's found in Deuteronomy. So basically, unbeliever is what he's saying. Um,
And that's
yeah,
the Hebrew meaning for
yes, the
no
Hebrew
faith.
meaning.
Okay.
And
Well,
this,
that's
with
interesting.
Yeah, and with that, I says, okay, let me see if I can find that in Egyptian. Again, this is after the book. I thought, okay, again, I saw that. I go, yeah, that was one I had a problem with. In the Onomasticon, I couldn't find any really good match to the meanings that they had, but this one was pretty much straight on. So, um, you have the Egyptian word for faith is this glyph, this V22. Oops. And again, it's a whip. It can be reversed or flipped. One of the reasons why we have this form, I'm not quite sure if um, uh, this is found in conjunction with the ite. So it's a layman ite. Whether they referred to layman when they referred to him individually with something slightly different, I don't know. But again, I don't have layman appearing as an individual in the time period of the characters document. So it's just laymanite. But you can see that it's this whip, this curled whip. There's also the line here that makes up the glyph. That means basically not a believer, no faith in Egyptian. So the glyph again matches the Hebrew meaning. Um,
Okay, that's interesting.
yeah. I also propose that there, this also, we have another little hook form. It can mean a carrier or a bearer of no faith. So maybe that was part of it too.
And
Um,
that would also tie in with sort of this broadened view that a lot of scholars and apologists are having towards Lamanites, that it's not just a term for the literal blood descendants of Laman and Lemuel, but basically all those that weren't
yep.
Nephites. And that would
Yeah.
make
And
sense
that's,
with this
that's what I'm
meaning
saying.
being unbelievers are having no faith.
Right. And that was like a small little article, but I actually thought that was very important that he came up with that, because that kind of changes your whole thinking of the book, which we always kind of knew
Yeah.
that because again, there's something, as you
And
mentioned
there's
previously, there's
even some scriptures, like, because I've been doing a little bit of research on this topic, and I think Jacob kind of says like all those that fight against the Nephites, I will call Lamanites, or all those who
yep.
mix with the seed of the Lamanites are called Lamanites. And even at the end of the Book of Mormon, it's very much about sort of, are you a believer versus an unbeliever versus like your racial or designation, or you being a blood descendant. So I think the Book of Mormon, when you read it carefully, has a broader view when it comes to Lamanites as well. But it's really interesting how the Hebrew meaning, and you're saying that Egyptian character as well sort of supports
Well,
that.
what I'm saying is it's just like I've been doing. So in this situation, you have a Hebrew meaning.
Yeah,
Let's find the word. Let's find that. Take that meaning in Egyptian and see what glyphs make up that word,
yeah. Take me. Okay, yeah.
and that it matches. So that in Egyptian, again, you got to flip the glyph and do. It's not this upside down. It's a flipped over hook, but it's still a hook. That makes the meaning of not faithful, right? In Egyptian. So again, what we're seeing is Reformed Egyptian reflecting the Hebrew meaning. Um, I also said, yeah, there's some. This might mean bearer of no faith. I mean, it may have a double entendre type meaning. Sometimes it may mean the same glyph may be represented in hieratic, could mean the same.
And
So
if a critic were to say like, well, it's kind of convenient that it's like flipped, so you're kind of trying to say like it's a match or a correlation, but they might think like you're having to contort the character to make it work.
yeah,
Would
I
you
don't. I
like the Nephites talk about modifying the
well,
Egyptians? So
but
you're
here's the interesting thing though. It may have been layman be different. This is actually from the Ite glyph. So that's what I said. Maybe the orientation for as they wrote Lamanite is different. Maybe they did flip it and have that form for layman. I don't know. I can just tell you where I have Lamanite. It matches the layman part. There's another glyph for tribe. I don't show it here. The other interesting thing is this the glyph also matches, and we're going to get into that in a different session, is there are directional glyphs in the Book of Mormon that match the Egyptian, and that means upriver as well in Egyptian. So it's the upriver tribe. So that may be why, and that matches the form of the directional glyphs pretty closely. So it's flipped in the directional glyphs. So
okay.
what I'm saying is you actually do find it in the proper orientation in a later Egyptian glyph. So that's in the book. Unfortunately, when you that argument, I can basically say, well, actually, this is also a directional glyph. So it has the meaning of an upriver tribe as well, because the line means water and that hook means the upper kingdom. So that's what the Lamanites were. They were upriver of the Nephites. Um, so there is a reason that maybe it's oriented that way, because it's actually talking about the directional as well. All I'm saying is you maybe they took that and flipped it the other way when they were talking about Layman himself. I don't know that. I don't have that as an example to look at. If I had the plates, it'd make it a lot easier for me. But I don't.
Yeah,
I mean,
gosh,
if
you're
I
going
had the
to
rest of the
back.
plates, if I had
That
the
makes it so
rest of
much
the plates,
easier.
yeah, if I had the rest of the plates, I could look at all the forms of layman. I don't have it, so I just got laymanite. That's all I have.
Right.
So I'm taking
So
that and saying,
inconvenient.
yeah. And here's the other thing that's interesting. But I did figure out previously that the hook and the line do actually mean the word filthy in Egyptian. So,
Oh,
as you know,
that's one of the descriptions given towards the
exactly,
Ammonites.
in many places. So, and kind of interestingly, in Mesoamerica, this glyph form of the hook is found in Teotihuacan, and it means excrement, filth, and sin. So, I actually think there's a Mesoamerican example of it that has the same meaning as the Egyptian or close to the Egyptian. So,
Right, that's quite cool.
yeah, and again, this is another complex one. Um, but again, I'm trying to deal with kind of the tougher ones uh, in the first part, so people can't say I'm just showing you the easy stuff. I mean, a lot of the stuff that's to come is actually just a straight correlation to the Egyptian. You don't have to like figure out, what the meaning of a name is or something. So they have this is on the very bottom part, the very end of the Book of Mormon. I mean, at least in the prophetic calendar that it has. And what it looks like is I'm calling it God the Father and Satan, but it's complex because in the Egyptian, well, here, I kind of show you, here's the glyph form for Father. Um, it's consisting of these glyphs here. This is the section, these are the characters that show Father. These are the X1, that's the version of the X1. The the I9, this is a version of it. And there are two X1s. You actually have two of them, which actually is not inconsistent with some of the definitions in the Egyptian. So you kind of knock out that. But why I have to show all this is because in the Egyptian, the um, in the onomasticon for Satan means adversary or opponent in Hebrew. Okay.
Hmm.
In the Egyptian word for opponent, you actually um, you have the word, and then you are supposed to put who it's opposing next to it. So it's found next to whatever you're opposing. So remember, we had, the Father up here. Then you have um, this glyph form here for the Egyptian. So the reason they do that is because it's like you're face to face with somebody. So this D2 glyph is this thing here. The Z1 glyph is this here. So, or no, excuse me. The G17 is this one here. And then the Z1, I didn't put it, that's just a straight line in Egyptian. It's basically just a line like that. And so you actually you have a flipped form of it here. So you have the opposing, you have to have it next to the God the Father. There's the opposer right there.
So you're saying that the characters for God the Father are only there because when it's written like the adversary in Egyptian or Hebrew, that it would always have the person who's like the opponent written
Yeah,
as well. Is that
right.
what you
Yep.
mean?
Yeah. And so when you're saying Satan, you actually have to have God the Father in there to show you can't just be the opposer. It has to show
Who he's
who's
opposing.
opposing. He's the opposer to
Oh,
God the Father, right?
oh, okay.
Because that's a definition in Hebrew is opposer, but to say that in Egyptian, you have to put to say opposer, a person that's an opponent, you have to say who he's uh,
Opposing.
uh, yeah, it's because then
Right.
he's like, and it's face to face, so that's why the glyphs are flipped. So they're in this
They're
form. He's
facing each other.
flipping, yeah, they're flipping away. So he's like, um, it's almost like he's facing away from God the Father. The other thing is then you have these like three additional glyphs, like straight line glyphs, like the Z1. Um, oops, I've got your picture in front. I can't read it here. Oops, sorry.
Okay.
I gotta just move it around.
Wait, don't you move it?
No, I did. No, I'm moving you around. I just can't
Oh,
read it. Sometimes it's covering the text, so I'm trying to move it, and sometimes I flip the page up by accident.
that's all right.
And so, and then actually when these three Z1s are moved, or I mean, or excuse, are shown in this fashion, it's not an accident because they're placed together in the form that they call it Z2 because it's got two different dashes. It's a substitute for sign representing human figures which are regarded as magically dangerous. So that's actually part of Satan's name is kind of the magically dangerous opposer of God the Father. So
It's quite fitting.
yeah. So that's what I say. It's actually a very complex. So it has God the Father there. I kind of show you that, but I also it's really Satan. It's a long name for
But
Satan.
a lot of glyphs just
Yeah.
for Satan.
Right. So that's one example where it's not that compact, but maybe, they kind of had to show that to, and, sometimes they maybe didn't want to compact certain things because they wanted to emphasize it. I don't know, we don't. Okay. Now we got Mormon. Now we talked about earlier, there were four glyphs, not part of the characters document that we have translated. There's a scrap of paper from Oliver Cowdery and Oliver Cowdery's handwriting that say this. And then Frederick G. Williams had this on a page of a document, probably copying from Oliver Cowdery, presumably. But so we have Book of Mormon, and I actually handle all these in my book too. So I show that those translations are correct from Egyptian that he's given. So, but Mormon is an interesting one. Again, we're going to kind of go off track a little bit here. Um, as I mentioned, it kind of matches the Jubilee glyph form, kind of that curly. Um, it's kind of a mirror reversal of the one. And and then in the Egyptian, you have the um, the onomasticon gives a whole bunch of possibilities for Mormon. I didn't list them all because they didn't really. Sometimes I don't list it if they don't have anything to do with it. So in this situation, they have listed um, MR, the Egyptian for bind or girth. So you find that word in Egyptian, it's the V12 glyph. And here is the hieratic. So that's a pretty close match to Mormon in the Egyptian, right?
Right.
You have this kind of curly Q there.
Yeah, yeah.
It's pretty close. Again,
Hmm.
it's a flipped, you have this thing to the right instead
So,
of
so
on the
you're saying
left.
that the meaning for the word Mormon is bind or girth, and that is an Egyptian. It's hieratic, isn't it? That glyph.
Yeah. And it also, in the simplest form, it can also mean the last or the end. Um, it also can mean similarly to be wise, this glyph form, meaning not in the Hebrew. I'm not taking from Hebrew now. I'm just looking at now that I've identified the glyph that matches, there are other meanings of that glyph in Egyptian.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so I think it's actually adding more than the Hebrew, right? I mean, they use this and it's used in as part of the words of documents, journals, ritual book, papyrus roll, stela, even actually, inscription. So again, it's a glyph that's matching Mormon consistently. Does
Hmm.
that make sense?
Yeah.
In Egyptian. So it's actually has a lot more meanings in Egyptian than just the Hebrew meaning.
Right. Okay. That's cool.
Yeah. And now I look in Mesoamerica because this glyph is actually in Mesoamerica as well. It's called the lazy S motif, and it goes clear back into the Olmec. So it's land northward stuff, which that's where Mormon's from, interestingly enough, you know. Um, and so you have it, it's a mirror of the lazy S. Um, it's been interpreted as a blood scroll. So again, it has some meanings related to records, like in the Egyptian. And then it also means it's like the cloud where water raining, the water comes out of it. Up here, you can see it above these are the chalk, the rain god. Um, and of course, in the Book of Mormon, we have the waters of Mormon, right? So there's even some correlation that his name maybe they call it the waters of Mormon, not necessarily because of Mormon. That's because that was his glyph name. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. And so I kind of go through that. I do show, I'm not going to go into it here, but I do show that actually in Sumerian, if you take that name in Sumerian, you could actually, it also means wild beast, some sort of wild beasts, which is talked about, you know, adjacent to the waters of Mormon. The
Oh.
wild beasts inhabited the land periodically. So,
Hmm.
and
Okay.
just another kind of Mesoamerican correlation. The glyph actually has those meanings in Mesoamerica. Okay, here's the Nephi based on the word Nephite. Okay. And so we talked about the Nephi second, Nephi third. This would be Nephi one. Again, we have Nefer and good. Here's the word in Egyptian for that, for Nefer. And again, that is a meaning, is an Egyptian word. They're not saying Nephi has a Hebrew meaning. You know, the Automascon, everybody's kind of said that means beautiful in Egyptian. So his name is an Egyptian derivation. And so the hieratic versions are this. So actually, they thought this was like a lute, but now they think it's actually a heart and a trachea, is what that Egyptian glyph is representing. Um, so again, it has a similar form, has a cross form. Um, Also, I'm showing here lower, it also has the same form as the word for protector or protection in Egyptian. And if you notice in Second Nephi 6:2, says Nephi, unto whom you shall look as a king or a protector. And then the people love Nephi exceedingly. He having been a great protector for them.
Hmm.
So it actually does mean protector in the Egyptian. So that's what's helpful about having the Reformed Egyptian. It actually can show you the correlation to the name. Meaning, again, it's one of these where you have an Egyptian name, um, and then once we know what the Egyptian form is, it can have other meanings in Egyptian that match him.
Right, right.
It's how he's described in the Book of Mormon.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah, and then
I hadn't noticed that.
yeah, and then I kind of also show that there's another correlated word, nebi, that also means protector phonetically. So you may have actually had another derivation. I mean, it may have matched his name two ways, not just Nefer beautiful, but Nebi protector. So it was kind of a pun, maybe if you want to call it that. A similar
It seems like a lot of the names in the Book of Mormon were almost like puns in that way,
Yeah.
sort of like describe like the meaning of the individual.
Yeah, and I don't go into it, but like if you actually lay it out in Sumerian, and the kind of the interesting thing is Hi, means alloy or plates. Um, and if you look at the Book of Mormon, every Hi had plates. Even Gadian High, he was wicked, but he had these oaths, the secret oaths and stuff, the records, you know. There's one of the leaders of the last group of a battle group. We don't know anything about him, so I don't know. I can't say he had plates or not. But so there's actually, it looks like even maybe they're matching. The name has meaning in Sumerian too. Um, I can kind of show that in the constructed Sumerian. So sometimes, again, that's the question: are these names given to them? birth, or are these constructed after the fact? I'm telling you, they're probably constructed. They're probably given after the fact.
Do you ever share any of these insights at your local ward on a Sunday? And people just look at you like, what the heck is
Well,
going on about?
I I used to, but then they asked me if I was investigating the church or what. They thought I wasn't even a
It just
member.
sounds gibberish to the average lay person.
Yeah, it's impossible. I mean, it's too, I don't know. Some of my stuff's just kind of shocking, I guess, to some to say that maybe the name wasn't the original name. They just freak out. I mean, general authorities probably would freak out too, but
But
so
it's
it's not
interesting
just,
that if you see it in the Bible, like it
yeah,
it's quite cool seeing that.
yeah. But it's just, it would shake the whole, I don't, I, the, what I'm saying is it kind of turns the Book of Mormon on its head, at least with regard to the names. Because then it's like, wow, so maybe he wasn't really even named Nephi. This was a name
Yeah,
originally. It's just to, which actually, like we know, like Native American, they would give him a name when they reach puberty based on their accomplishments or something like that.
yeah,
Um, or and they give a meaning to the name, like the movie Dances with Wolves, where they see this guy dancing with wolf, and so that's the name they give him in their Indian language for this army person. It's a movie. I mean, it's not. It's based on a true story, but
I've
so
not seen it.
yeah. Well, anyway, you don't need to. But what I'm saying is the concept of giving a name different from at a point of maturity is not an unknown thing amongst
Right.
the Native Americans or necessarily.
And it's like
So
the narrative is sort of based around the meaning of the name.
yeah,
It's
and
sort of
I'm saying
named after that.
right. Some of them may have been good way after the fact, but
Yeah.
and like even Lemuel, I kind of show. I haven't even published this, but I've mentioned it maybe on a podcast. But I was looking at that because I was looking at the travel where they stopped on the in Arabia, on the when they were Lehite was traveling. They have the Valley of Lemuel, and it actually there's another guy has shown basically said, well, there's a volcano as Mount Sinai, and if you take the stops before that, he's identified that same place that Book of Mormon people has identified for the Valley of Lemuel, the constant stream and all that, um, as it's called Massah. That's the stop of the children of Israel in Exodus. That's where he identifies it to be. But it's interesting because in the Bible we have the name Lemuel, which was the king of Massah. Um, and Massah, um, a pun of it, it means contention. So
Hmm.
you have basically Lemuel. If you're losing the Bible, it's the king of contention. So, so not only is there a pun, it's kind of a joke. So,
Right. Hmm.
anyways, so I think there's all kinds of things within the names. I'm not saying I've figured them all out. I'm just saying I think some of these. I mean, there may be other stuff. So it's like Matt Bowen works on things. So I think as more research is done, we'll find even more correlations.
I'll have tried doing an interview with him. That'll be fascinating.
Yeah, you can. He's at BYU Hawaii, so you can just probably has his email even on the internet.
Yeah.
You can look him up.
Already.
So place names again. We'll try to flip through these and then we'll be done. I know it's probably how much time we've
I think
gone, but
we've been going over just over 2 hours at the minute.
okay. Do you want to stop here, or is that about the length of?
How many more slides do we have roughly?
Well, see, we've got place names and tribal names. We got a lot more to go. So
Yeah,
we could.
maybe stop here for tonight.
Okay. So I'll flip through them. Just read it. Did you read that? Read that. There we go. We're done.
My
So,
goodness, this is a lot of information.
yeah, I know, and that's what I told you. When you wanted to hear about the characters document, it was like, there's no way I can really give it justice by just trying to. You really do have to kind of see
Break it
how
down,
yeah, break it down, see
like
that,
step
like
by step.
right. And when I'm showing you, the names are consistent, right? Meaning it's not this arbitrary name. They're not it's they are actually handling them. They're taking the meaning of them, putting it into Egyptian, and oftentimes picking an Egyptian form that also has other meanings that actually match the individual too, like Nephi, for example. So we know it means the first Nephi. It's beautiful. We can see that. We can see the glyph form that matches that, but it also is the same glyph form as protector, which is talked about in the Book of Mormon. So he actually, that glyph has two meanings. So that's why I'm saying it's complex on more levels than even, because we know the Reformed Egyptian for it, we can actually see that the glyph forms themselves have more meaning than even what we got translated into the Book of Mormon. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Wow.
And so anyway, well, last time you yawned about this point, so we can.
Yeah, this is quite mind blowing, and my simple brain trying to get my head around it. I think this is probably something that listeners would have to probably maybe pause the screen, read through, or really try to digest it, because I
Yeah,
think listening, because I tend to listen to podcasts usually at like 1.5, 1.75 speed. And
yeah,
I don't think that, and usually I don't watch them that much. I'm usually doing other things. And this is one where if they want to get a lot out of it, probably be watching it, pause the screen, read through it to try to grasp.
right.
I think this has been really fascinating.
And so maybe next time we can deal with the tribal, um, the place names and then the tribal names. And maybe I'll have a few extra in there. So that'll probably get us to the 2 hours again. So I mean, again, it's important to talk about them. Meaning I could just rip through them, but it's important to ask questions. So if the point is to understand what's going on, then you want to have the
Right.
discussion, right? So it's okay if we don't cover everything.
Yeah. No,
and
no, I appreciate the very thorough analysis that you've done.
and you have to space them. Like you don't want to have all these podcasts together or people would die, right? So you're going to have this and then some other funny ones in between. you know? So
Yeah, I
so
need a
maybe
few
next
in
month.
between. The views would just slowly go down, like part two, like 1,000 views, part three, like 500, part four, like 50 views.
Yeah, right. You don't want to lose your viewers,
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to put like a controversial one. I don't know. That's why people say, "Do you watch
Well,
the podcast?" I
I'm
go,
doing an
"Well,
interview with Jacob Hansen tomorrow, so that'll be a different controversial one. So that'll be fun.
oh yeah." And see that, I don't get into any of that
That,
stuff.
that'll be a different type of interview.
Yeah, I don't get into any of the. I mean, I'd follow all these things. Things are going on in the church and concerns of people and all this stuff. I watch some podcasts, but honestly, I spend most of my time doing this kind of research, which, as you can see, is not, it takes time and it's very, as you know, my research is not just throwing something out there. It's very detailed,
Oh
referenced.
yeah.
Yeah, and so it's like defendable, right? Because I knew I can't just throw out some translation of the character's document. Of course, people are going to freak out, right?
Yeah.
If I'm going to do it, I have to be very, you know, methodical, academic, all referenced correctly. Try not to make any speculations that, again, there's a little bit, okay, this variant, but I kind of explain that, as to my link as to why that glyph form might be flipped or something, just like the question you had. So as a result, my books tend to be long, um,
Yeah.
and with
How many
huge.
years did it take you doing this research and like writing up the book? How many years did you
Well,
spend on this?
here's the interesting thing. I actually translated it in like 4 months, but I worked like I have what's called restless leg syndrome. So I can only sometimes, it's not so bad anymore, but I used to only sleep like 2 hours a night. And so I thought, well, this will help me get to sleep working on this kind of stuff. But actually, I would go all night because it was so fascinating. I just was
Yeah.
finding so much stuff. And so, I mean, I was very exhausted at the end, but the initial translation took like 4 months. Now, to publish it, to write it all up, I just had all my notes and everything, and I had like outlines. And then it took, another year to get it edited and write it up and get all my citations and references proper. And see, I actually was right in the middle of writing the book on Ziff. The only reason I looked at the characters document was because I calculated the number of plates and all this, and so the question arose: can you fit all the Book of Mormon on the number of plates you've calculated, right?
Right.
So then, okay, I'll look at that. It wasn't really what I was trying to do on the metallurgy of the plates, but that's an ancillary question that would have come up. So I thought, well, I have the characters document. Let's assume that maybe it was copied because it's like 8 inches wide, so that matches about the width of the plate. So maybe we can assume that the size of the on the characters documents of these glyphs maybe what's pretty close to the size it's on the plates themselves. And I was looking at it and I was like, wow, there's the Mesoamerican number nine, um, down here. And then I'm like, well, there's Egyptian, because I knew Egyptian numbers. I knew Egyptian number systems pretty well. I just been fascinated with ancient number systems, because just the way they are constructed, and it's like, and that's like a number four, and there's a five and a 10 right next to it. I go, well, that's obviously a number set. An Egyptologist had figured out the same thing. He had actually identified these early one, the one up here, as a number set. And so, um, and then, you know, it was kind of fascinating because I kind of just said, you know what, I'm not going to finish the Ziff book. This is like too interesting. Another thing about the form, I thought this is cool because that's not the Maya form of the number nine. That's the Teotihuacan or Isthmus of Tehuantepec form of the number nine. So it's actually in the right location, that actual number form. So I just said, you know what, bag this Ziff book. I'm sure it'll be interesting. And the metallurgy. And so I actually worked on this. That's the way I do things. I'm not trying to answer questions. I just go where I find interest, right? And then sometimes I'll just not abandon it, but I think, oh, this is more interesting. I'm kind of like, the cat with the light that you put around in front of it, it'll chase it. That's a
Yeah,
little bit.
it tends to be obscure topics that don't get a whole lot of other attention in, faithful scholarly circles.
Yeah. Well, see, these are like people are saying, are you responding to the critics? I'm like, no, I'm just responding to myself. I was like Ziff. I was like, what does that mean? Why not? Okay, maybe I can figure it out. Took a
Yeah.
long time. I got, a linguist, David Calabro, and then ordered a bunch of Arabic lexicons and Arabic from Lebanon because I couldn't find them anywhere in the United States. And so, I mean, but it's like if you're going to figure some of these things out, you got to be prepared. It's not just going to be simple, easy.
Yeah.
If
No,
you're
this
looking
is
at an ancient text of Reformed Egyptian, okay, can I expect? There's no. It's not going to Google it, right? So I guess what I'm saying is I do anticipate that my research takes a long time, is very thorough, but it's very thorough, and I publish it just for myself, just to put it out there. I don't sell books. If someone wants to buy a hard copy, I have a few extra, but libraries want them. I says I'll just donate to you. I put all my stuff out for free, so anybody can download it. Because part of it is too, is if people have these questions, I just see so much like on podcasts, people say, oh, what about this? I'm like, that question has been answered 20 years ago. You just need to look it up. But people don't take the time or want to look into the research that's buried somewhere. And so, because they
or
have to,
they're just unaware. They
yeah, or
may
it's in
not
a
know
book that
where to find
it's,
it.
it's in a book they got to buy that's no longer in print, right? And it's maybe $800 on Amazon. No kid with a faith crisis is going to do that. And so, not
Uh,
that I'm trying to stop people with faith crisis, but I put it out there. I can actually explain things. I can answer questions that they've had, like Reformed Egyptian. Well, it is, and
I think
whether
it's
you,
all about trying to make like the scholarship and all the academic research that's been done on different topics, like things with the book more, make it more like accessible and like understandable. I think, for example, Scripture Central is quite a good resource for that because they uh,
yeah,
do take a lot of like scholarly articles and they try to simplify it and present it and reach a lot of people. So it's trying to find that way to like bring a lot of these scholarly books or articles more, you know, to the light, people listening to podcasts, people on YouTube,
yeah,
and
exactly.
trying to make it
That,
understandable. I can
and
just
that's
have
why I'm
access
doing,
to it.
and that's why I'm doing this podcast, so people can look at it and say, well, wow, maybe there's something to that, right?
Yeah.
The other thing is, like Scripture Central, whatever. A lot of people are good at like putting information out, but what we really have a deficit on right now is really research.
Yeah.
Because Matt Bowen's doing good, but he's kind of on his own. Book BYU hardly produces anything really related to Book of Mormon, other than maybe like looking at the text and some doctrinal interpretation or something like that. Maybe the vision of the tree of life in Near Eastern thought or something. Those are not like they're not valuable, but like the specifics and especially like the location and geography, all this kind of stuff. Nobody really hardly works on that since John Sorensen died. Um,
I think you
that-
need to do a book really like trying to put everything together on Mesoamerica, like taking all like the convergences and things with the geography and then things with the names, like things that you've been talking about here, and like put it together in like one massive book. I
Yeah.
think something like that would be really good. I know he's on Mormon's Codex,
Yeah.
but that
Well,
would be
what
helpful.
what I did actually, if that Swords of Shul book, that's the reason I wrote that, because I actually did some research on pollen count showing that the deforestation, we talked about that before, looking at the burial. I mean, I went through a lot of stuff and the chronology explaining it. One reason, and I did draw up a lot of maps and geography there because that was one area that was deficient, I would say. Nobody really fleshed that out. John Stearns had a few proposals, but the land northward was really lacking. So I did do work, but I selected where I thought, okay, here's an area that needs more work on the geography and the correlation. Because we have Mormon's Codex, which some people discount parts of it, but it's still pretty good. And you have the earlier book by John Sorensen. Meaning, I do think there are certain areas that are kind of covered, and there are, some people work on that, but you don't really see any publications anymore on it.
Mm,
It's Mormon's Codex. And, Brad Gardner has done some books related to Mesoamerica, but he doesn't get into like the maps or the specific locations too much. He's mostly just looking at the pattern of, there's kings and a certain right time frames and that kind of thing. So,
yeah.
but there are people at Book of Mormon Central that have knowledge and, have done a little, like you've seen more like Neil Rapoli did the metallurgy, plates looking at different examples. So,
Yeah, yeah. That was a really
so
good episode
right.
and good
Yeah.
research.
So there is some research going on, but partly that's one reason but I found just like scientific and linguistically, there wasn't really much of anything. And then you had Brian Stubbs who had all this work, but didn't have any money to really put it together and publish it. So I hired staff for him to actually, put format it, do all of the appendices, because you have to like list all the words and multiple appendices and then publish it for him, um, because he was not able to get it out. And I mean, it was just too much. He didn't have staff. He just, he's working, he's got kids and grandkids and there's no money. So I guess I'm saying I've kind of just tried to like do my own research, pick up other research, like Don Bradley's book. He was working on it, but the 116 pages, but it was having a hard time because he was, had not had some employment. He did like Brian Hale's stuff, and so he was kind of in between. And I says, "Hey, I'll just pay you. Just finish this chapter, and I'll give you this much money." He was just trying to help him along because I thought like that's an important piece of work that needs to be finished and out there. So, but he wasn't a college professor, right? So he was an independent person.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
kind of
These
I tried.
scholars and historians and researchers, they need some financial support as they're doing their scholarly research because
Yeah,
it's
and
important.
so that's kind of my bailiwick, if you want to call it. I mean, I do the scientific research. I don't really hardly know anybody that's doing that. And then I do linguistic research and also sponsor linguistic research if I can find people that'll do it. And then I do try to find these other really important research that's not going to make it out there because they don't have academic institutional backing. And you know what I'm saying? So like Richard Bushman, he doesn't have difficulty probably getting money to publish a book, right?
Right.
Well, I mean, he's paid as a history professor, and so he's probably got all the connections. Whereas these other people they're just trying to get something out. Some people like submit to interpreter and they get rejected because sometimes they don't have professional editor, right? And so they don't really know how to even put it in the Chicago manual format and all this stuff. So so I try to help where I can those researchers and then do my own. And and again, I do try to, and I kind of said this in one presentation I gave. I'm kind of the Star Trek researcher. It's like I go where no man has gone before.
Yeah. That
I,
definitely describes you, I think.
I just take on stuff nobody's got or complex stuff that people just rip their hair out. Sometimes I don't make, for every hour of, for whatever you see in the book, 20 pages, there's 100 pages of stuff I didn't work. I didn't find, there's a lot of research you do. It's like, oh, I'm totally on the wrong path here. So
To be honest, I don't think I could see somebody wanting to do like a response to your book just for the sheer fact of like just how awful it would be going through all this and like trying to respond, like how in depth and thorough, like you'd be spending, like you'd be going way in the weeds. Unless you're a linguistic expert, it'd be tough to.
Exactly. And that's why when, you've seen it in your comments, sometimes they blah blah that he doesn't know he's talking. I was like, read the book or at least read part of the book. No, I'm not going to read. It was like, okay, if you don't read the research, you really have no ability to comment on it.
Yeah,
And so that, yes, because a lot of the people don't want to, especially the critics, don't want to spend the time that it takes to go through it. But actually, like I do paid review, right? So I pay people to review these things. And when they go through them because they're paid, they actually are like, wow, you know, I think it's blind review too. A lot of it, some of it's just, I used a company that on one of my books and
so it's not shoddy or pseudo scholarship as critics often
yeah,
say.
like all the Sumerian stuff I sent to, it was a company called Rubric who does, they don't do it now for linguistics, but they would basically do peer review. So it's a private company that does all the peer review for you. So when you submit it to like a journal, they just will accept it because they know they can document all the peer review that's done. So they don't have to use their own people to try to do it. Now, books don't have peer review that way typically anyway. Articles do because books are so voluminous. Usually people have some review, but they also expect book reviews, right? It's kind of a post peer review is what happens with a lot of books where then they'll criticize it. Then the person has to, respond, that kind of thing. But I can tell you, so the people, like the Sumerian guy, basically says your methodology is correct and everything, meaning in the way that you're using the Sumerian dictionaries correctly or not. But and I don't know who he was. He was obviously a professor of these languages somewhere. But at the end, he just said, "Well," he said, "but of course, you're talking. This is coming from the Book of Mormon, so it can't be this because the Book of Mormon is not true."
There's
And
just no, yeah, there's no way angels don't come and deliver
yeah,
it.
right, and so I get that, but at least he went through it and had to, was forced to actually look at the Sumerian, look, not just discount it because it was Book of Mormon. He did say, okay, you're using these correctly, but I just can't see that this can be true because it's coming out of the Book of Mormon, right? So, um,
Wow.
yeah. And I had one guy, it was interesting on this book I did on the signs and wonders and all this. And he was actually professional. He was a scientist and just he was a debunker known for debunking basically naturalistic, showing every religious thing is really just has a natural explanation, you know, which I have too. I do that too. And so he goes through, he goes, "Oh, it's so great how you've gone through and just shown that this night of brightness and these signs and wonders that were came from God, or just, the aurora borealis and a coronal mass emission event." He goes, "That's great." He says, "You totally debunked this." I said, "Yeah, the only problem is what I'm debunking is from a book that was given to a guy by an angel." And I'm showing, and he just said, "What?" And another Charles Anthony, he goes, "Well, then just forget everything I just told you." So,
Wow.
yeah,
That's so
so I
weird.
can't, yeah, but again, that's what you get when you just have to, they're not, you recognize you're not going to get acceptance by all these people. It's not going to happen because if they know the genesis of it, they're just not going to go there.
Yeah,
And
that's
it's my BYU professors. Most of them, if they're like Maya said, they don't write anything on the Book of Mormon because if they do, their peers will say, "What are you talking about?" Right? Even though it may be accurate and actually
yeah,
maybe add to the volume. So
just
I
won't be
think,
taken seriously.
yeah. So when you say yes, are they going to get into it? I mean, one guy got into it and he was saying, "Well, I think that doesn't look like this Egyptian glyph. Maybe it's this other one." I says, "Yeah, well, now you're agreeing that it's Egyptian, right?" And so, so
Right.
what? Yeah, I'm saying you can't really, you can't say that you can't go through my book and say there's no Egyptian in the characters document. It's like ridiculous, Um, and you can argue whether, the name of Mosiah is exactly, but I mean, that matches pretty good. So again, it's like, but they just ignore it because it's convenient. It's easier to talk about horses, right? Why do you
Right.
want to? Which there's answers to that too, or cure moms and Q moms. I figured out what those are. They always joke about that. I go, well, actually, it makes sense what they are, and so I mean, there's actually explanations. I mean, swine was another one. They were like, what about pigs? And it talks about swine. There's no swine, and I'm like, well, actually, they're peccaries, and they were called, the Spanish called them wild pigs. And then if the Book of Mormon, it didn't say they bred them, it says they raised them. And that's what they did in Mesoamerica. They would catch them young and then raise the piglets and eat them. So it actually, the Book of Mormon matches exactly what the practice is. So that what you call an anachronism is actually evidence of the Book of Mormon. And so I don't know. I just see that over and over that they just kind of go to the standard tropes of um, and I'm not saying there aren't some questions, like metals is still something to work on in the Book of Mormon. I'm working on that, getting
Yeah.
little
Brand
explanations.
acknowledged that still is but an outstanding anachronism in Mesoamerica.
Yeah, in Mesoamerica, but it may have been a trade item, kind of rare, something that they didn't. And we don't know what the other plates are made of. We've told gold plates of the Jaredites, but we don't know the plates of Limhi. We don't know what they're made of. They've just assumed that it's a metal, and I think maybe the language reflects that, but Book of Mormon doesn't really say. So I don't know. So yeah, so there's, and I'm gonna work on that too. I think I figured out some stuff
Yeah,
there.
I'd like to talk to Matt Roper at some stage on anachronisms. I know he's done a lot of work on it. We could always talk about it maybe in a future episode as well. I'm sure I've talked about it with lots of different scholars, but an episode very much going in depth, uh, looking at a lot of the specific ones, I think would be
And,
fascinating.
and see, that's kind of the interesting thing. I look at it and say, okay, I can show you the characters document, give you a translation. For me, it's mostly correct or primarily, I mean, you can see there's a little bit of variation possible on some of the glyphs, but that, and then what everybody wants to talk about is just, so I have all this evidence, I have geology evidence, I have all this other evidence that all overrides like any one or two anachronisms that may be there that are probably explainable by translative techniques or something. So they always gravitate towards those, saying these are like the death knell of the Book of Mormon. Like, well, you're ignoring all this other evidence
Yeah,
that I
that's the way I
brought and
view
presented.
anachronisms as well. You need to take into account the evidence in favor. If there's no evidence in favor, then you might see some of the anachronisms as more devastating. But if there's you got a body of evidence, things in the New World, convergences with Mesoamerican Mayan culture, geology, the Old World, like looking at the political and religious context, 600 BC, I think the Book of Mormon is quite consistent with it, and the travel through Arabia, the incense trail, Nahum Bountiful, like it's important to look at the things in favor as well.
Yeah, and that's one reason I talk about the names because in my new book, I kind of show now that I know the exact chronology, I can show that the year before the last battle, that's when the Maya king, which we know from Maya inscriptions, whose name was Born of Fire, that's the meaning, knocked off Tikal, took over all these areas. He was backed by Teotihuacan, so it's again a Gadianton connection. And so he amassed a large number of people and then came over, so it makes sense that Mormon got overrun. They were innumerable, right? They didn't just have this many kids, the Lamanites. They were obviously consolidating power. And his name, means born of fire. Well, Aaron, one derivation of Aaron in Hebrew, is born, conceived in flame. It's a calque, just like I say.
Mm.
So I actually can show you that name in the Book of Mormon matches the Mesoamerican name, the exact time, exact place, exactly explains what happened. So
So
again, they're
fascinating.
saying, yeah, so they're saying convergences. I'm saying, I think I got way more than convergences here. We've got some evidence that's starting to come out of the research as more and more is known and studied, um, that, can show you the direct ties to everything. Does that make sense? So,
That makes sense. Well, this has been
yeah,
awesome. I've really enjoyed this time doing this interview with you, part two, looking at the characters document, looking at the names and how you went about translating and the meaning of the names. We'll do another episode as well. We'll probably be doing one maybe every month or two. Uh,
yeah, whatever
do an episode
convenient
on it.
for you.
And listeners who've watched this video, if you've enjoyed it, give it a like, comment underneath as well. Go check out Jerry's books as well. And if you have any questions for Jerry, reach out to him or leave a comment. I'm sure you'll have a look through the comments. We'll see you next time on Mormonism with the Murph. Take care. Bye-bye. Thanks everyone for watching this episode. If you've enjoyed it, please give it a like, share it with others who might benefit, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future content. You can also listen to these episodes on podcast form on Anchor or Spotify, and you can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Check out my website for more content, personal blog, and more. And if you care to donate to support me, you can via my PayPal or Patreon, or through the website. And you can also give donations via YouTube through Super Chats. Thanks for watching Mormonism with the Murph. Take care. Bye-bye.